a wine cork, a hidden letter, and a toast that turned deadly. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Tell me, where are you joining this mystery from tonight? Your comments bring this channel to life every time. If there's one thing I can count on, it's that the sanctity of the brownstone holds steady until Wolfe decides otherwise. He might complain about my interruptions, or Inspector Kramer's phone calls, or even Fritz daring to substitute a leaf of sorrel for parsley, but the walls of West 35th Street are supposed to keep the world out. That's the deal. So when a woman showed up at the door on a Tuesday afternoon with a wine bottle in one hand and an envelope in the other, I figured I had two choices. Option 1, tell her Wolfe doesn't open the door, I do, and therefore she had better make this quick. Option 2, let her in, since she had the air of someone who wasn't here to sell subscriptions or win prizes. She looked about 35, compact, brunette, with eyes like she had slept badly for a week and didn't plan on catching up soon. The bottle was half wrapped in newspaper, but the neck showed enough glass for me to peg it as Bordeaux. The envelope was plain cream, the kind that doesn't mean anything until it does. I'm looking for Mr. Wolfe, she said, steady but with a crack under it, like glass under strain. Lucky you, I said. You found him. Or you would have if he was in the habit of answering the door. I'll do the honors. Name? She hesitated. That's always a sign the name means something. Miss Lenore Vance. I ushered her in, because the hesitation backed by a Bordeaux bottle is more promising than half the checks Wolfe cashes. I parked her in the front room and gave her the rules. No smoking, no touching the orchids, and if Wolfe barks, don't bark back. Then I ferried the news upstairs to the plant rooms, where Wolfe was shoulder deep in a cloud of damp air and green stems. He looked up like I'd interrupted a coronation. Archie. Must you? She has a bottle of red Bordeaux and an envelope, I said. Also, she looks like she either hasn't slept in days or she's about to ask for a coffin. That got him. He set down his sprayer. Bring her here. I didn't. I brought her to the office because no client was ever going to see Wolfe in his shirt sleeves misting orchids. 5 minutes later, he came down, broad, deliberate, settling into the red leather chair like a king taking his throne. Lenore Vance sat across from him with the bottle on her lap. She didn't waste time. Mr. Wolfe, I need your help. I found something. A letter. Inside a wine cork. I raised an eyebrow, because that's the sort of sentence you expect from mystery novels, not women walking into your office. Wolfe just looked at her, heavy-lidded. Explain. She placed the bottle on Wolfe's desk with both hands. It was at a dinner, a wine from my late uncle's, cellar. When we opened it, the cork was odd, lighter than it should be. I pressed it and the cork split. Inside, this. She slid the envelope across. Wolfe glanced at it but didn't touch it yet. His eyes flicked to me, which was his way of saying, Archie, note this for the record. Lenore's voice dropped. The letter names people. It hints at a betrayal, something financial, something dangerous. My uncle died last year. And now, I think someone wants it back. I've had my apartment searched. Twice. That was when the hook caught. Because the cork might have been a curiosity, the envelope might have been a family spat. But a searched apartment. That's when Wolfe leans in. Not literally, physically he leaned back. But I've learned to read the shift. Pfui, he said softly, a sound of disdain that meant interesting. I was already writing the script in my head. The brownstone had been disturbed, and if a letter in a cork could drag Lenore Vance here, it was about to drag plenty more trouble behind it. Wolfe let the PFUI hang in the air like an inspector's cigar smoke, and then crooked 2 fingers at the envelope. I slid it closer, because if you want to see a man large enough to block out a window act like a jeweler with a flawed diamond, you give him his toys. He didn't touch it, not at first. His eyes had a talent for handling an object before his hands got within a yard. When he finally lifted the flap with the ivory opener, it was as polite as surgery. A thin strip of paper came out, brittle and the color of old cream. It wasn't long, 4 lines and an afterthought, but it had the personality of a tax audit. I read over his shoulder because I know how to be useful. The writing was compact, deliberate, a man trying to make ink behave. It listed 3 initials and 2 words that could have been a brand of crackers or a warning. VAMKSH, settlement to be squared outside the ledger. Lattice continues only with full assent. Red Willow, number 18, preserves leverage until my return. Betrayal voids the bargain. Lenore watched our faces like they were a stock ticker. "That's it," she said. It was inside the cork when we opened the bottle. The cork split oddly. It was hollowed and lined with something, shellac maybe. The paper was tight as a seed. Wolfe didn't look at her. "Your uncle wrote it?" "I think so. He had a hand like that. He kept notes, always little notes." "Dates?" "None." She swallowed. "He died last May." "And the bottle?" "From his cellar. We were toasting the end of the inventory. I'm selling some of it. This one we opened on Sunday. I thought it was just a 2005 power yak." It was. She glanced at the desk as if expecting the cork to appear, confess, and go quietly. "The note is older than the wine. He must have tucked it into the cork and resealed it." "Slovenly practice," Wolfe murmured, "yet practical." "The initials," I prompted, because initials are like invitations, rude to ignore. She had them ready, which meant she'd rehearsed on the cab ride over. "VA is Victor Ames. He was my uncle's business partner for 6 years. They fell out before he died. MK is Mara Kell, my uncle's assistant. She managed him. SH is Soren Holt. He owns a restaurant in Tribeca and helped appraise the cellar. Lattice. I don't know, except the word came up once when he was on the phone. Red Willow might be Red Willow Vineyards. My uncle had a lot from that label. And no, 18 feet. There's a catalogue I've been struggling through." Wolfe nodded without wasting it. "Names are not answers. Describe the occasion on Sunday. Who present? Sequence of events." She did it in order, which I appreciated. There were 5 at her apartment on 73rd Street. Lenore, Victor Ames, Mara Kell, Soren Holt, and Dr. Lionel Brodie, a professor who had advised her uncle on some ethical governance nonsense that never stopped anyone from dipping a paw when it itched. Dinner was meant to be farewell to the last crates and a civilized argument about whether to sell the Cheval Blanc as a lot or tease it into singles. Holt had brought the opener and the posture that goes with handling other people's money in glass. He worked the cork. It split like a dry twig, and something pale showed in the middle. Holt tried to preserve the bottle's dignity, while Lenore, quite reasonably, lost hers. There was the paper, and slender as a lie. She palmed it. Ames had smiled and said it was surely an old tasting note, and wouldn't it be stylish if her uncle had hidden love letters in the claret? Mara said nothing, and watched everyone else. Dr. Brodie adjusted his glasses and pretended to be embarrassed by the theater. "Any prior mention of Lattice that you can place?" Wolfe said, eyes half closed. "Only once. On the phone, he said, 'Lattice is only as strong as the assent,' and then laughed, which he didn't do often. There were arguments with Victor. After my uncle died, Victor tried to get me to sign an amendment to something. An understanding, he said. I didn't sign. 'Wise,' Wolfe said, which for him is a standing ovation. 'And after you discovered the note?' I put it in my pocket and said I had to check on dessert. I texted myself a photo in the kitchen. Then I came back and said the cork was empty. I must have sounded unconvincing because after everyone left, I found my drawers disturbed. Last night, the place was searched. Not ransacked. Careful. My desk was neat in a way I don't make it. Someone wants the original. Of course, Wolfe said. A picture is a scent. The paper is the pelt. He let the silence sit on our knees and then added, You have enemies, Miss Vance, but that is not a quality, merely a circumstance. Do you retain counsel? A firm that sends me cheerful emails and bills. They told me to let them handle the cellar sale and not to worry about my uncle's eccentricities. Bah! He tapped the note with a thick finger as if to count to 1. This reminds me of a man who tried to store decisions in riddles. A poor habit. The world is overstocked with people willing to misread. He looked at me then. Archie, the safe. I took the paper as if it were made of egg and put it in the envelope, then in the small steel box Wolfe keeps wedged under the lowest shelf of the globe. It is neither the only safe nor the best, but it's the one people underestimate because it is obvious. I spun the lock and enjoyed the click that means a thing has stopped being anybody else's problem. The bell rang. Fritz, away in the kitchen, called something in Swiss that meant either I have a souffle in the oven or you can answer your own door. I went. The man on the stoop had a messenger bag and a helmet dangling from 2 fingers. He had the posture of a guy who can be invisible when he wants to be, which is a trick most men buy after they buy a motorcycle. He offered me a polite grin. Delivery for Miss Vance, he said, and showed a clipboard. The paper on it was one of those blanks you get at stationery stores when you want to impersonate a real business. The from line said Bernard and Pritchard Wines. It was underlined twice, as if to make it truer. She's all out of deliveries, I told him. Try the neighbors. They order more than we do. He worked on the grin like a man pressing a bruise. The sender said it was urgent. A bottle she left. I can wait. You could, I said, but I wouldn't recommend getting attached to the idea. I had the door angled so he could enjoy my shoulder, but not the room behind it. His eyes slid past me toward the inner hall anyway. He didn't see Lenore, which was the idea. He switched hands with the helmet and the bag shifted enough for me to catch a glimpse of paper stuffed halfway in a coil of string. An old trick. If you don't get the thing you came to fetch, make do with the thing it's hidden in. I pushed the door 2 inches narrower. Tell Bernard he'll have to live with the suspense. He weighed it, decided he wasn't being paid for drama, and left with a nod that promised we would meet again. I stepped out far enough to get the number of the sedan down the block and the brand of boredom the driver was wearing. Then I went back, because I've learned that if you leave Wolfe alone with a client for more than 3 minutes, he teaches her a seminar in listening. They knew you came, I told Lenore, standing where the threshold ends. Our friend on wheels was ready to collect a bottle that doesn't exist. Either someone followed you from your apartment, or someone at your building called a pal, or one of your dinner guests has an informant with a good memory for doors. Wolfe shut his eyes and opened them again, which for him is bowing to the obvious. So the brownstone is now public knowledge among the curious. Pfui. Miss Vance, if you intend to persist, and I advise you to, you will not return to your apartment tonight. Archie will arrange a hotel under a name that isn't yours and will remove any objects of value that might tempt another visit. You will take nothing from here. The note is ours until I return it. She nodded, exhaustion catching up like a bus that finally found her stop. And what will you do? Think. He leaned back as if that were a verb requiring upholstery. But first I require a list. Mr. Ames's address and office, Miss Kell's current employment and any grievance she carries, Mr. Holt's restaurant and whether his sommelier owes him love or money, Dr. Brodie's department and his latest publication, the catalogue of your uncle's cellar and, in particular, the entries related to Red Willow. Numbers around 18 if the note is literal. You will provide me access to the cellar records. Archie will collect them and examine your rooms for evidence of competence in the recent search. I looked at the clock. You're not getting me a nap before dinner. You can sleep in the taxicab, Wolfe said, which he knew I wouldn't. He turned back to Lenore. One more thing. Why did you come to me rather than your counsel? Because if this note is what I think, it isn't only about law. She swallowed again. She was using it as punctuation. My uncle disliked courts. He believed in leverage. He told me once that justice is a word people use when they've run out of bargains. He would have wanted a bargain. You may not like the bargain I make, Wolfe said. I'll live with it, she said, which you can say in a room like ours, because you feel protected by the furniture. The phone rang. I got it. The voice was a man's, smiling without teeth. Tell Miss Vance the cellar won't need her signature after all, he said. Tell her all's forgiven. Tell her to bring the bottle opener to Bernard's at 9. Try 10, I said. We're eating at 9. But the line had clicked off. I relayed the poetry. Imbeciles, Wolfe said, which, coming from him, is a handshake. Archie. Yes, sir. Call Mr. Durkin. I will want him to watch the restaurant. Not inside. The alley, the loading dock, the pattern of who arrives early and who leaves late. Not yet. He lifted a palm. After you have settled Miss Vance. For now, draft 4 notes. 1 to Mr. Ames, 1 to Miss Kell, 1 to Mr. Holt, 1 to Dr. Brodie. Polite, firm, requesting their presence here tomorrow morning at 11 to discuss a matter which concerns the estate of Mr. Howard Vance and their own reputations. Add that failure to appear will oblige me to communicate with the appropriate authorities, which is a lie we may later dignify. Delivery? I asked. You, he said. Personally. Hand to desk, hand to hostess, hand to secretary, hand to whomever will feel the heat through the paper. Do not telephone. The telephone is for cowards and fools. Lenore stood as if the chair had nudged her. I can give you addresses. You can write them, Wolfe said. Use Archie's pad. Do not add annotations about who sleeps with whom, as that can be deduced. He shifted, then winced at his own shift. Fritz. Fritz appeared like a butler in a French farce and waited for instructions that would not include farce. Wolfe said, cold chicken with tarragon. The corn salad. And if you have a mind to, that mustard you favor when you are forgiving us for the day. Fritz smiled and vanished, leaving behind the smell of something that would improve my mood even if the city couldn't. Lenore wrote. I watched her hand as much as the addresses. It was steady now. That was either courage or the brownstone doing its work. When she finished, I took the list in the envelope copy she had texted herself and put both where paper goes to become action. Wolfe had closed his eyes again, which didn't mean he wasn't paying attention. With him, closing his eyes is how he turns the room down to think. You understand, he said without looking at her, that if your uncle used the cork as a coffer, he did not intend the note for strangers. It is both a map and a threat. Whoever wanted it wanted not the words but the leverage behind them. They have already acted once. They will act again. The only question is whether they will act foolishly in my vicinity or sensibly at a distance. I'd prefer them foolish, I said. Of course, he said. That is why you are you. I got her to a cab with a name that looked like it belonged to a school teacher from Iowa and a hotel that could find a room where no one would think to ask. On the sidewalk, I scanned the block. The sedan had gone, the messenger had not loitered to admire our architecture, and the city was pretending to be harmless in late afternoon light. It fooled everybody but me. Back inside, Wolfe had not moved a muscle except the one that controls disapproval when I tracked a fleck of street into the rug. He opened one eye. Well, they're cautious, I said, but they know the address. If they were smart, they'll try softer next time. He closed the eye again. If they were smart, they would have left Miss Vance to the small competence of her attorneys. Since they are not, they will come here, where I can see them. Arrange the notes, Archie. Then, after dinner, we will consider Red Willow, number 18. What if it's just a case of confused botany? I asked. What if Red Willow is code for a woman's dress or a horse that throws money? Then we will have eaten well for nothing, he said, which is never nothing. He exhaled, a contented proprietary sound. Human folly, he added, more to himself than to me, must be taken with food. Dinner at the brownstone has a way of making the world look solvable. Fritz put down the chicken with the mustard that could make a pessimist smile, and Wolfe did his part by eating like a man who knows appetites are not to be insulted. He spoke 3 times, once about the tarragon, once to say that Lenore's description of the searchers suggested an old hand with a new errand, and once to tell me I would go out after coffee because paper has to be put in hands while it's still warm. So I went. The night had the kind of honest chill that keeps car doors from sticking. I started with Lenore's apartment because Wolfe hates working with other people's filing systems if they're more creative than alphabetical. The doorman had the face of a man who has seen too many dry-cleaning disasters to be moved by a blonde in pearls or a man in a hat. I gave him the name I was wearing and the look that says I'm exactly as boring as my shoes. Upstairs, Lenore's place had the smell of furniture that's trying to remember whose idea it was to be expensive. I didn't touch anything with fingerprints, which is a habit that spares you explanations later. The desk had been reset by someone who believed in geometry. Papers squared, pens parallel. It would have earned a gold star in kindergarten and a warning from me. The searchers had gone through her things like gentlemen thieves in a streaming show, careful, thorough, too proud of themselves. A pile of corks on a tray told me more than the neat drawers did. She'd said she was inventorying. The corks were tagged with dates and bottle names, some with wax rubbings. One was missing a tag string but had a shine to it that didn't come from the bottle's breath. Someone had handled it longer than necessary, the way men toy with a coin when they're thinking up a lie. I found the cellar catalogue on a shelf pretending to be art. It was a 3-inch binder with tabs that made as much sense as a senator's promises. Whoever had put it together had used a system of codes that would confuse a bookie, RW for Red Willow, SB for St. Bridget, and so on, with numbers under each label like pews in a church. Red Willow number 18 lived between number 17 and number 19, which is the kind of miracle only numbering can do. The page for number 18 had a yellow flag. The entry read, RW18, 1990, mixed case. 4 remaining, condition stable, hold for lattice, do not disperse without assent. See addendum B. There was no addendum B in the binder. There was an addendum A, which had dates and initials under a column called Settlements Off Ledger, which would look bad on a brochure. The initials matched our note, VAMKSH, with small check marks and 1X neatly inked next to Red Willow series. A faint circle of old wax stained the bottom corner of the page. I took photos with my phone and then, because Wolfe would want to see the actual paper breathe, slid the binder into a tote along with a manila folder of receipts and 2 small notebooks with columns, the kind men keep when they're planning to forget in a traceable way. I made a tour through the bedroom and bath. In the closet, a shoebox had cleaner edges in the dust than the rest, and under it, the carpet nap was combed wrong from a knee. Inside the box was nothing but tissue paper that remembered a pair of shoes. Someone had used it as a perch to work on the shelf above, which held nothing but winter scarves and the fresh absinthe where a small lockbox had been. You can tell by the square imprint and a single brass shaving caught in the carpet. I called Wolfe. Yes, he said, which is his way of announcing he is correct before you start. They took a lockbox and left a geometry lesson. The catalogue says Red Willow number 18 is tied to lattice and requires assent. There's a reference to an addendum B that isn't here, and the cork tray is 1 tag lighter. Good, he said. Not for Miss Vance, but for us. Return the binder. Take nothing else. Do not linger. They watched the door earlier. You want me to come home by way of Tribeca? Of course. Mr. Holt keeps late hours. Deliver his note to his hand and look at his sommelier. If she blinks too often, note it. Nothing for dessert but observation, I said, and hung up. I left the building by the side door that opens onto an alley for the benefit of men who don't want to tip twice. On the street, a grey sedan idled 2 corners down. It was the same make and boredom as before. This time the driver had upgraded to a phone at the chin. I zigged, then zagged, then took a walk through a private garden whose sign suggested I was not welcome and thereby guaranteed I was. By the time I found my cab, the sedan had decided to be interested in someone else. Holt and Ash was a restaurant that had a front door for regulars and a side door for animals that walked deliveries. I used the front door and a smile. The maitre d' had cheekbones that could cut glass and a tone that could make you wish you were glass. I gave him Soren Holt's note in an envelope that looked like money and the kind of grin that suggests you might be a columnist. He didn't blink. "Mr. Holt is engaged," he said. "That'll be a first," I said. "Tell him it's about the Vance cellar." That got a breath's worth of space in his face. He took the envelope. I drifted to the bar, which had a mirror that pretended not to care, and there was a woman behind it who did. She wore a practical black dress and the habit of watching. She was pouring a Sauvignon Blanc for a table that wanted to pretend it could taste gooseberries. When she came my way, I asked for seltzer with a twist, because men who want to look like they're not drinking shouldn't try too hard. "Rena," a waiter said to her, by way of naming her for me. She got me the seltzer and gave me the once-over you give a man who looks like he's here for either a date or a problem. "Kitchen closes at 11, she told me, which was a way of asking what I wanted before the door locked. "Your boss," I said. "And a moment with your wine list. I like to read the obituaries." She smiled with the side of her mouth that didn't believe me. The list was a hardcover book with more pages than some marriages, and halfway through I found a section labeled Heritage Lots, Provenance on File. Red Willow had a paragraph about pioneer Washington fruit and historic Cabernets, and a footnote in 5-point type. Some lots reserved for private ascent. It wasn't a smoking gun. It was a smoke machine. Soren Holt arrived with the envelope in hand and a handshake designed by a sculptor. He was mid-40s, the kind of handsome that happens when a man learns to stand in good light. His eyes were the color of old bronze, and they did not warm. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "your note says tomorrow morning. You have the air of a man who couldn't wait. I'm a fan of breakfasts where everyone knows they're invited." I tapped the envelope. "This gives you the time. Consider this the ambience." He turned the envelope over as if it might hide a second message. "How is Lenore?" "Cautious," I said. "Which may be new for her." He filed that. "Tell Mr. Wolfe I have a reservation at 9 tomorrow for a critic with a pen that doesn't pay his bills. I will not be late to his lecture." "I'll tell him you appreciate continuing education," I said. "While I'm here, your sommelier still owe you love or money." He smiled, like a man fending off a mosquito with a fork. "Rena owes me excellent work, which is rarer than either." "Good evening, Mr. Goodwin." He left, and Rena, who had overheard enough to stop pretending not to, pretended anyway. I closed the list and drained the glass. In the mirror, the maitre d' was taking a note at the podium from a man who didn't look much like a diner. The man glanced at me, let his eyes slide off, and left. I decided I preferred my side door and took it, down a hall that smelled like shallots and ambition. The office of Victor Ames was on the 23rd floor of a building that has never slept. The woman at the night desk had a haircut that would cost me lunch for a week and an appreciation for stationery that would cost me more. I gave her the note and the look of a man who will wait, which I wouldn't. She called. I sat. I counted the number of leadership books on the shelf behind her, 7. And when the elevator sighed open, it gave me Mr. Ames dressed like the answer to a question you were afraid to ask. He took the envelope and me in the same glance. Isn't this an hour for wives and television? It's an hour for people who want to know what they're doing at 11 tomorrow. His smile tried to own the room. Then you may tell Mr. Wolfe that I make my own hours. If this concerns my late partner's cellar, my counsel will attend in my stead. Tell your counsel to bring a loud voice and a flexible conscience, I said, and tell him Mr. Wolfe will not seat him unless he can prove he's more interesting than you. Ames considered being offended, found it too much like exercise, and settled for urbane. Do extend my regards to Miss Vance and remind her that settlement means what reasonable men agree it does. Reasonable men don't hide terms in Cork, I said. His eyes flicked at that. Just a blink, but a real one. I left him with his lobby and took the world's fastest elevator down and the world's slowest cab across to Midtown East, where co-working spaces wear glass like a middle-aged man wears denim. Mara Kell met me in a glass box that thought it was an office. She had the kind of posture you buy with Pilates and the kind of calm you rent with Xanax. The name on the door said Kell Strategies, which could mean anything, including Mara and a laptop. She took the envelope, didn't open it, and said, "He always liked appointments. He likes them when they keep people from pretending they're busy," I told her. She didn't smile. I took that as a compliment. "You and Mr. Wolfe make a team," she said. "People say you're loyal. That's rare." "People say a lot," I said. "Your former employer's catalog says Addendum B. Where is it?" Her eyes didn't flick, which is a skill. If you already looked, you know it wasn't in the file cabinets. Howard kept some things in his head and some things in places no one would look. He enjoyed that. Such as a cork. "I never poured for him," she said. "I scheduled him, I told him which meetings he was avoiding, and I reminded him we lived in a country with laws." He liked having me say that. It made him feel civilized. He also liked settlements outside the ledger. "Your words," she said gently. "Not mine." "Tomorrow at 11. "I'll be there," she said, "if only to see whether Mr. Wolfe can make Victor Ames stop talking." "Come for the silence," I said. "Stay for the logic." Columbia gives even the ethically earnest offices with old wood to improve their odds. Dr. Lionel Brodie had the kind of beard that announces thought and the kind of tweed that announces it twice. He read the envelope like a prophecy. "This is theatrics," he said, which from a professor is a kind of confession. "I told Lenore to use the courts." "You also told Howard Vance to keep certain conversations off email," I said. "That's in a notebook with a coffee ring." "I tell everyone that," they said. "Not because I endorse their deeds, but because I endorse my sanity. If this is about lattice, you should understand that the term occurred during a seminar in which Mr. Vance abused a metaphor. What did it mean in his mouth? Structure built by mutual assent, he said, pleased with his own memory. Remove assent and the structure collapses. Unless someone replaces the nails with bribes, I said. He steepled his fingers. You are too cynical for your age. It's the air, I said. Tomorrow at 11. Bring your memory. By the time I stepped back into the brownstone, Manhattan had decided to rehearse being empty. Fritz had left a plate under a dome for a boy who missed a course. I didn't. I put the binder and the notebooks on Wolfe's desk and sat while he read them without touching them. This is a trick he does where you watch his eyes move and you realize he's flipping pages in his head. Addendum B, he said. Confound it. It exists, I said. At least once. Of course. Miss Kell will pretend she has not seen it. Mr. Ames will pretend it is an invention. Mr. Holt will pretend all life is inventory. Dr. Brodie will pretend language is a fence he built, and somewhere there is a box missing and a cork that was not born shiny. He peered at me. You were followed. For a block, I said. I provided them an opportunity to upgrade their entertainment. Good. We will allow them to think they have lost the scent while we arrange the meet. He leaned back. Tomorrow we will ask them questions to which I already prefer the answers. Tonight you will sleep because in the morning you will remember nuances. And Archie? Yes, sir. Phone Miss Vance. Remind her that no one should be allowed to deliver anything to her room. Not flowers, not fruit, and especially not charm. I phoned, and she answered with the voice of someone who had found a pillow and earned it. She promised to accept nothing, not even civility, and rang off with thanks I told her she could pay later. When I turned back, Wolfe had closed his eyes, which meant he was again outdoors in the structure he built with thought. "Red willow," he said almost idly. "Number 18 preserves leverage. So simple. You think you know what it is? I think I know what it is not," he said. "It is not a bottle. It is not a case of wine. It is a location, perhaps a slot in a rack, perhaps a designation in a storage facility, at which something that is not wine abides. A small lockbox would do, hidden in a place no wine merchant would question. In plain sight. As always," he said. "Fetch Mr. Durkin at 8. I will want him behind the restaurant by 9:30, before Mr. Holt counts his critics." "You're anticipating they'll move tonight?" "I'm anticipating they can't help themselves," he said. "They think they understand leverage. They will come to adjust it. We will observe." He opened his eyes enough to pin me. "Archie, human life is a chain of tolerable indignities. This one annoys me. Go to bed before I become indignant." The morning came in through the kitchen windows the way it always does, trying to be polite about it. Fritz has an agreement with dawn. It may enter, but only through the glass, and only after the coffee has made its case. I came downstairs at 7:30, which for me is either industrious or punished, and found the atmosphere charged with something that wasn't caffeine. Fritz was frowning. He doesn't frown often. His face has better uses. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, and pointed at the drawer where sharp things live. There was a gap where a paring knife should have been. I don't do the kitchen inventory. I just benefit from it. But even I knew that drawer like my own pocket. The missing space was as neat as a tooth gone from a good smile. On the counter was a cutting board I hadn't seen last night, and on the board a faint, greasy ring the size of a quarter with a red fringe like lipstick gone wrong. The sink held an Arso cork puller, two-pronged, the kind you use when you want to coax a cork out without killing it. We didn't own one. The prongs had a varnished sheen that wasn't water. "You didn't put that there," I said. "I do not own that," Fritz said, which is as close as he gets to profanity. "And I did not put the board there. I wiped after the salad. I left the kitchen at 10:30 to fold napkins in the pantry. The back door was locked when I returned. This morning I came down and found this arrangement." I leaned and sniffed the ring. It wasn't lipstick. It was wax, the red kind you see on old bottles and in Victorian letters. Under it was the ghost of shellac. I lifted the Arso by a dish towel. The prongs had that coat a man gets when he's been where he shouldn't. I set it down like it might declare the 5th. "Any sounds?" I asked. "Only the refrigerator when it thinks aloud," he said. "I would have heard footsteps. I did not. The garden gate shows new oil on the latch. I did not oil it." I went to the back. The latch was clean and dark with patience. Someone had decided squeaks were for amateurs. The sill had a nick where a tool had kissed it. If you want to get a big man's attention, you don't need to ring a bell. You go to his kitchen and move a small knife. Wolfe doesn't come down early for theatrics. He comes down early when he's already seen them. He entered at 8 with the morning's gravity in his shoulders and stopped at the drawer. I gave him the tour in 10 words and the visuals in 3. He surveyed without touching. "Pooey," he said. And it wasn't appreciation of technique. The fool's varnish. They came to experiment. "With corks," I said, "which they didn't bring with them." "Or they brought one and took it away," he said. His eyes went to the garden door and then to Fritz. "Your domain has been trespassed. I apologize." "You do not apologize," Fritz said stiffly, which is his way of accepting. "You permit me to sanitize, after you have finished seeing." He added, almost to himself, "They put the paprika where the cinnamon goes." I checked the rack. 2 jars had swapped shoulder partners. If you want to know whether you've had company, find a man who alphabetizes spices and ask him what letter is out of place. Wolfe shifted his attention to the office without shifting his bulk yet. "The safe," he said. We went in. The globe hadn't confessed, but the dial beneath it had a whisper of talc. Not much. Enough for a fingertip to try and fail to have a conversation. Wolfe bent as far as a mountain bends and grunted once. He straightened and walked to his desk, sat and made the chair accept his weight like a formal duty. "They didn't get it," I said. "If they had, we'd have a clean desk and a guilty room." "They had neither the time nor the number," he said. "They wanted to know whether we are careless. They now know we are not." We let Fritz set a cup within reach, and Wolfe let the coffee argue its case while his face decided a punishment. He doesn't enjoy rage. It interrupts digestion. But he had a version slow and cool enough to chill tea. "Call Mr. Panzer," he said. Saul answers like a man who has been awake for an hour already and has read the paper you haven't seen. I gave him the outline. Messenger with helmet. Sedan with patience. Lenore's geometry lesson. Holt's hospitality. Ames's lobby. Kell's calm. Brody's beard. And our kitchen's new habit of misplacing knives. He didn't grunt. He doesn't waste grunts. "Plate on the grey?" he asked. I gave it. And the messenger had a bag with string and paper. He works like a man who collects things that fit in pockets. "I'll find him," Saul said. "And the plate belongs to a Delaware LLC used by 3 Midtown offices. One of them is an investment firm with a Victor in executive photos." "I should have guessed," I said. "You did," he said. "You called me. I'll ring the super at Miss Vance's building and find where the phone call went when she signed in last night. If someone paid for notification, I'll get their receipt. Also," I said, "see if Bernard and Pritchard Wines exists outside of envelopes." "It exists in 2 Yelp reviews written by the same woman 3 years apart," he said, "which is why Wolfe keeps him paid. I'll report at 10. Wolfe hung up his end without saying thank you, which for Saul is included in the rate. He looked at me. "The arso," he said. "Find out where such a thing can be purchased within a mile of Holt's restaurant and whether anyone bought one after 9 last night. Take the prongs for comparison later. Do not carry them openly. Return the knife to its absence." "Why the knife?" I asked. "Because whoever returns to see whether we noticed will be comforted by our ignorance," he said. "We will borrow their comfort." I bagged the puller with the towel and slid it into my pocket. The board I left. The ring could tell a story to the right ear. I phoned a shop on West Broadway that sells corkscrews like jewelers sell gilt and asked a question designed to flatter their expertise. In 15 minutes I had a clerk who remembered a man with chef hands buying an arso for an old bottle at 10:20 last night. Cash, no small talk. Chef hands are scarred and deliberate. I'd seen a pair pour Sauvignon Blanc with care. "Describe him," I said. "Young old," the clerk said, which is a category. "Black jacket with the restaurant name I shouldn't say." "You shouldn't," I agreed. And he didn't. By 9:30, Durkin called from Tribeca, chewing a word that wasn't breakfast. "Back alley at Holt's," he said. 10:15 to 11:30, deliveries. 10:40, Rena, your sommelier. Steps out alone with a slim case like a flute box. Hands it to a guy with a messenger bag and a helmet in his hand. He's our wheelman from yesterday. He doesn't leave. He loops the block and parks behind a grey sedan that wants to be seen by no one. At 11:10, sedan rolls. Messenger follows. Both head northwest. "Where?" "Didn't chase," Durkin said. "You said observe the pattern. The pattern says someone thought the alley smelled like leverage." "Stay," I told him. "Wolfe wants the dock watched again tonight. Count who arrives early and who leaves late." "Already counting," he said, and hung up with the comfortable arrogance Wolfe pays extra for. I told Wolfe, and he closed his eyes as if to be alone with a chessboard. When he opened them, they were not friendly. "They think Red Willow is portable," he said. "Good. They will carry it somewhere we can see it." We didn't have to wait long for Saul. At 10:05 he came in with the smell of a subway and satisfaction. He put a folded paper down on Wolfe's blotter like a hunter's offering. The paper was the messenger company's roster. 9 names, 1 circled. A cell number, a past address in Queens, a current gig list that included contract pickups for Holt and Ash, and private clients in Midtown, cash preferred. The grey sedan belonged to Kestrel Holdings, which had 2 directors and an office that shared a wall with Ames Partners. The super at Lenore's building had a brother-in-law at the desk last night who had accepted $200 in small bills to text a number if Miss Vance left with any wine-related item. The number belonged to a prepaid phone. The name on the apartment hall visitor log at 9:05 had been B. Pritchard, which at least kept their sense of humor oiled. "And the wine shop?" I asked. "A phone, a storage closet, and a web page registered by a company that also owns an events LLC called Lattice Social," Saul said. "The events are members-only tastings conducted by Ascent. The locations vary. Last month's was in a private room under Holt's. The year before, one in a midtown boardroom with Ames on the invitation. Dr. Brodie gave a talk at one called Ethics of Ascent. He was paid in wine. Red Willow shows up on a member's board as an heirloom lot, access upon consent." "Addendum B," Wolfe murmured. "Not a paper, a list of members." "So Ascent was literal," I said. "A club that votes on who drinks the leverage." "Ascent is a currency," Wolfe said, disgusted. "They were paying one another in permission." Saul added one more paper, a printout from a bonded storage facility in Long Island City, the kind with cold rooms and concrete. The sheet listed off-site lockers by code. RW18 had an access recorded 3 weeks before Howard Vance died. Badge HV, escorted by MK. 2 days later, there was an attempted access denied. Badge VA, no escort. The next access was yesterday at 2 in the afternoon. Badge SH, escorted by event vendor. Nothing was removed, at least according to the ledger that exists for auditors. "Your event vendor," Saul said, "is a woman named Rena Alvarez. She moves rare bottles for private tastings and never drinks on the job." "Rena with excellent work," I said. Wolfe looked at the clock. It was 10:32. He enjoys punctuality the way other men enjoy horses. He looked back at me. "We will not ask Miss Alvarez anything until we ask her boss," he said. "Archie, arrange the chairs." I arranged the chairs. You wouldn't think there would be art in it, but there is. Wolfe likes the witness chair angled so the light from the west window hits a cheekbone. It makes bravado squint. He likes a space between chairs large enough to be a border, because people cross borders when they're nervous. He likes the table set with nothing but a blotter and a beer. When he's feeling playful, he adds a book open to the middle. It makes people talk as if they must earn his eyes. At 10:45, the bell rang. Fritz went. He returned with Doctor. Lionel Brodie, who had shaved or at least tamed the idea of shaving. Wolfe never rises for a guest unless the guest is sauced with garlic and brown butter. He nodded Brodie to the chair nearest the dictionary. At 10:50, Mara Kell arrived, composed and pale, with a folder that could be anything from a resume to a confession. At 10:55, Soren Holt came with the appropriate apology for being late to his own ego. He smelled faintly of smoke and oak and something else that belonged to last night. He took the seat that let him see the room as if he owned it. We were at 11:02 when Victor Ames made his entrance the way a man makes an entrance at his own funeral, with a smile that says he's read the will. He had a lawyer with him and left him in the hall after one look at Wolfe's chair and one at mine. We had our circle. The kitchen had been trespassed, a knife was missing, and the city had demonstrated its talent for exchanging assent for favors. Wolfe had his lips pursed in the shape that means he's about to enjoy himself at other people's expense. He let the silence mature as if it were a cheese, and then said, without raising his voice, "Thank you for indulging me." He did not add indulging you, which for Wolfe is mercy. He lifted a hand and let it drift toward the safe without pointing. "We will discuss a letter that lived in a cork, a locker that pretends to be a case of wine, and a cooperative fiction you call lattice. We will discuss who believes in consent and who believes in coercion." His eyes went to Holt's sleeves, then to the clean half-moons on his fingers. "We will also discuss my kitchen." I sat back in my chair where I could see their ankles and their hands, and, most importantly, their patience. It was intact for the moment. It never stays that way. Wolfe didn't clear his throat or rap the desk. He set the room by existing in it. When he speaks low, people lean in. When they lean in, they forget how to lie with volume. He began by informing them that the brownstone had been trespassed in the night. He said trespassed as if he were pronouncing sentence on a duchy. A small paring knife was missing, an Arso cork puller had been left, and a ring of red wax the size of a quarter had appeared on Fritz's cutting board, where no such ring had any right to be. He let that hover. Then, still polite as a hangman, he said he would hear from each of them, and that if any one of them attempted to interrupt, he would ring Inspector Kramer not as a stage device, but as an inconvenience they would not enjoy. That was enough to make even Ames develop a fondness for silence. He pointed a finger, not choosing so much as acknowledging the order he had already chosen. "Dr. Brodie." Brodie crossed a knee that did not want to be crossed and rested his hands on the tweed as if the fabric would contribute a footnote. "I'm here because Miss Vance asked me to advise her," he said. "You are here," Wolfe said, "because you advised her uncle and because you accepted compensation in wine at events arranged under the name Lattice." "Define it as you used it with Mr. Vance. The metaphor," Brodie said, soothing himself with his own diction, "was a way of speaking about structures held together by assent rather than by force. A lattice permits air and light through. It holds what it holds only so long as its members—" "Stop," Wolfe said, a dismissal soft as snow. "That is sufficient to show that you provided the concept and the language. Did you know Mr. Vance attached assent to the disposition of assets?" "I knew he fancied rules," he wrote, Brodie admitted. He enjoyed inventing constraints for himself, constraints that could be modified at his will. "And the phrase full assent?" Brodie blinked. "I may have used it in the course of an explanation." "You did," Wolfe said. "Your student took the words and made a device of them." His eyes shifted, slow and deadly, to Mara Kell. "Miss Kell." She had chosen a dark suit that didn't fight the light, which was prudent. "I worked for Mr. Vance for 4 years, she said. I scheduled, organized, filed, and told him when he was being reckless. You escorted him to a bonded storage locker designated RRW 3 weeks before he died, Wolfe said. You did not later escort Mr. Ames, and he was denied access. Your badge shows no other access." Mara's hands tightened on her folder just enough. "I escorted him when he asked. He wanted to verify an inventory list. He was old-fashioned. He liked to see things. We looked. We did not move anything." "What did you see?" "A rack labeled Red Willow. The numbers were stenciled." The slots were not all filled with wine. She paused. You could see her decide whether to seed the inch. She seeded it. One slot, 18, held a narrow steel box. He opened it. I did not read what was inside. "A paper," Wolfe said. "A sheaf. Slim," she allowed. He sealed the box, put it back. When Mr. Ames asked me later for Addendum B, I said I did not have it. That was true. "Addendum B," Wolfe said, tasting the phrase like something that might be undercooked. "Was what?" "A list," she said, not quite looking at Ames. "Names and signatures. The names corresponded to initials I had seen on some settlement sheets that were not in the general ledger. And the signatures signified assent. Yes, she said it like a woman letting go of her last umbrella. Without them, nothing could be dispersed from certain lots. It was his way of ensuring everyone stayed in the room. And who kept the list? He did, she said. He never let it go. He changed it sometimes and fussed over whether a signature meant assent or mere attendance. After he died, I looked for it. I did not find it. Wolfe let that settle, then shifted his regard like a ship changing ports. Mr. Holt. Holt can put charm on like a jacket. He doesn't always remember to take it off when heat would do. He sat with a waiter's erectness and folded his hands as if to bless his own tips. I manage a restaurant, he said mildly. My involvement with Mr. Vance was professional. He asked me to appraise his cellar with an eye to private tastings for charity. I put him in touch with vendors and storage. I'm not a member of any club styled lattice, and I do not vote on other men's appetites. Wolfe's eyelids went to half-mast. Yesterday, he said, at 10:40 of the clock, in the alley behind your restaurant, your sommelier, Miss Alvarez, delivered a slim case to a man, identified as a messenger your establishment retains, which man later parked behind a grey sedan, registered to a company that shares its office with Mr. Ames's firm. What was in the case? Holt's smile remembered it had other engagements. Tools, he said. Custom tongs for lifting aged corks. We had a special, later. A collector brought a bottle with a weak neck. This morning, Wolfe said, my kitchen held an arceau with shellac residue on the prongs and a ring of sealing wax on a board. We do not own an arceau. The wax was not ours. We are capable of purchasing our own tools. We do not borrow yours in the night. Who among your staff let himself into my kitchen? Holt, to his credit, didn't sputter. No one on my staff has a key to your home, he said. If someone trespassed, he will be dismissed. I can only say that Rena does not break into private kitchens. She is too busy fixing public wines. You buy arceaus when you need them, Wolfe said. At 10:20 last night, a man with chef hands bought one at a shop on West Broadway. Your name was on his jacket. Holt's mouth thinned. We are not the only restaurant with initials on cloth, he said. It was weak. He felt it. Mr. Ames, Wolfe said, and saved him from finding a better line. Ames didn't sit forward. His posture asserted that leaning was for employees. I attempted to safeguard assets my partner and I acquired together, he said. Yes, I went to the storage facility after his death to confirm their inventory. I was denied entry. Miss Kell chose to assert a clerical authority she did not possess and barred me from seeing what I had a right to see. I did not return. I've engaged counsel to resolve the matter. And the grey sedan that comforted a messenger? Wolfe asked. And the money paid to a doorman to text when Miss Vance carried anything wine-related out the door? Ames looked at me then, as if I were the impolite one for knowing things. I do not manage the conduct of every contractor who has ever worked for our firm, he said. I have advised men to be alert. If some overzealous minor figure chose to reach into his pocket to obtain notification, I cannot be held. You can, Wolfe said calmly. And you will. He let his tone warm a degree. Not friendly, but as if speaking to an animal that might not bite if you didn't breathe wrong. You were denied access. That irritated you. Mr. Holt had access. He used it. Miss Kell accompanied. She claims she read nothing. Dr. Brodie constructed the language that made your little polity seem palatable to itself, and all four of you attended a dinner at which a cork disgorged a letter that said, Red Willow knows 18 preserves leverage until my return. He will not return. So now the leverage is loose? Brodie's fingers moved on his knee as if counting, and then stopped. You believe, he said carefully, that Mr. Vance placed something in that locker to compel cooperation. After he died, the compulsion remains, but the administrator of it, Miss Vance, does not comprehend the mechanism. So you will take charge of it? Yes, Wolfe said simply. Because you are all incompetent at self-governance. Holt's laugh had a chip in it. What is it then, Mr. Wolfe? A note, names, the addendum B. If you know where it is, why summon us? Because I prefer to do my thinking when men are occupied with their own, Wolfe said. Also because last night someone came into my kitchen and practiced extracting a sealed cork without tearing it. That is more stupid than criminal. But it is both. Whoever did it will not have the opportunity to correct his technique. If any one of you wishes to claim the honor of idiocy now, do so. It will shorten the day. No one moved. That's the thing about silence. It weighs different on guilty men. Mara didn't change. Holt's neck muscles stood out as if they were reading a road sign under bad light. Brody watched the space just in front of Wolfe as if it might become a text. Ames smiled like a man who likes his dentist. Wolfe let 5 seconds pass. He is the best timekeeper I know. Then he said, Miss Kell, why did Mr. Vance write the letter in the cork? She didn't blink, and then she did. Because he didn't trust envelopes anymore, she said. He'd had a file intercepted once. He said a cork was better than a safe for a message that had to be found by accident. He was romantic when it suited him. Whom did he mean to read it? Me, she said, and it surprised her to hear it. He liked me to solve his riddles. He thought it trained me. He would have laughed at my delay. Mr. Ames, Wolfe said, you understood the message to mean there was leverage in that locker. I assumed, Ames said, and you acted at once. I attempted, he said. Mr. Holt, your access yesterday. We inventory before tastings, Holt said. I confirm lot numbers. We do not remove without authorization. His glance at Mara was quick, irritated, not fearful. Miss Kell? It's true, she said. The facility records both entries and removals. Nothing was removed. We have all learned, Wolfe said, to distrust ledgers when men are clever. He let his eyes drift to me. Archie. Yes, sir. Phone Miss Alvarez and ask whether she prefers to come at once to save Mr. Holt the embarrassment of lying poorly, or at 11:30 to prolong it. I went to the hall phone and did it. She didn't waste time with the receptionist. When I told her Wolfe wanted her here now to avoid indicting someone she admired for breaking into a private kitchen, she said, I'll be there in 10, and hung up hard. I went back in with that news as if it were a birthday. Doctor, Brody, Wolfe said, using the breathing space as a pry bar, you told a room once that a scent can be withdrawn, yes? That was your consoling fancy. What happens to a structure when one member withdraws a scent? It collapses, Brody said, as if grading himself. Then what happens? Wolfe asked softly. If the list of those who have assented is removed, or if one's signature is exposed as procured under duress, or if a dead man wrote in a cork that betrayal would void the bargain. Brody pressed his lips together, then let them go. If your argument is that they ought to dissolve their arrangement and face their legal obligations, we agree. But I suspect that is not your argument. My argument, Wolfe said, is that one of you believes he can reassemble coercion under a new name. That will not happen. He turned his head, just the head, the statue tolerating its pedestal, and said, Mr. Ames, yesterday your firm set a watch on Miss Vance's building. Your sedan lurked behind a contractor you use. This morning my kitchen reports evidence of cowardice and incompetence. You will not like my conclusion. Ames's smile tried to hold, then decided it was late for work. Threats are theatrical, he said. I came here as a courtesy. You came here, Wolfe said, because you could not afford not to, and you will return if I ask again, for the same reason. The bell rang before Ames could compose a rejoinder worthy of his cufflinks. Fritz brought Rena Alvarez, who entered like a woman who knows exactly how far a room is, and how long it will take her to cross it. She wore the black dress from last night, and a face that had put itself in order on the stairs. She took the empty chair without waiting to be offered and looked at Wolfe as if to say, "Your move." "Miss Alvarez," Wolfe said, "you are efficient." "I admire efficiency when it is not criminal. You will tell us why you handed a case to a messenger behind Mr. Holt's restaurant at 10:40 last night, and where he took it." "Because I didn't want to bring it through the dining room," she said. Her voice had gravel and honey in the right proportions. "And because a man in a grey sedan told Mr. Holt earlier that day that an investor needed reassurance that our W-18 existed and that the ascent lock was still in place. I don't know these men. I know service. I took the case because that's my job." He took it back after he verified the seal and brought it to me again. "I put it back where it belongs. I did not break into your kitchen." Holt opened his mouth. She didn't look at him. "My boss," she said, "likes his reputation more than he likes formality. He will sign for things a lawyer would not. That's my contribution to your morning." Wolfe considered her without condescension, which is not a generosity he extends to many. "The ascent lock," he said. "Explain." "A slip inside the steel box," she said. "The paper you're talking about, it sits on top of the contents. You cannot take the envelope under it without lifting the slip. The slip has 4 lines. If any one line is missing or scratched, it triggers an alarm on the locker's ledger and the storage men call. It's low-tech. It works because people are lazy." Mara breathed. Not loud, but real. Ames had the look of a man calculating the cost of a mistake he'd thought he'd amortized. Brody watched Rena instead of his knee. Holt changed color 1 shade toward honesty. "And whose lines," Wolfe asked, "are on that slip?" Rena's eyes came to me and then to Wolfe. "VA," she said. "MKSH and LB. Dr. Brody. That's what everyone agreed to at the beginning. That no bottle marked Red Willow Heritage would move without all 4 present or consenting. Howard liked unanimity because it made everyone pay attention. I told him it would break the first time someone had the flu. He said that was the point." Brody shut his eyes, opened them, and nodded once. "He asked me to serve as conscience," he said. "I signed because I believed oversight would prevent mischief. I may have been naive." "You were," Wolfe said. Ames lifted a hand, and then remembered the room was not his. "If that is true," he said, making the word work, "then the signature sheet is the key. If it is missing—" "If it is missing," Wolfe said, "you will accomplish nothing but noise. If it is present, you will accomplish nothing but noise because you cannot muster assent. Mr. Holt has already loaned his competence to a messenger who works for you. Miss Kell has declined to rescue you. Dr. Brody was fool enough to contribute ethics to a machine built to evade them, and is now stubborn enough to recognize his error. The only leverage remaining is a dead man's humor and a sheet of paper he hid where you cannot politely invite it to dinner." He reached for the bell pull, then decided against it. "We will adjourn for 1 hour. During that hour, if any of you telephones anyone about this matter, I will ring Inspector Kramer and arrange for a very public discussion of trespass, conspiracy to commit theft, and the corruption of a building employee. If you are tempted to test me, do. Archie, you will remain with our guests in the front room and entertain them by taking away their phones." I did as told. Holt surrendered his with a huff that said he would remember where I sat in his restaurant. Ames made me fish his out of a pocket he pretended not to remember. It was warm from plotting. Mara gave hers up without a look. Brody handed his over as if confessing an old sin. Rena kept hers until I raised a brow. Then she placed it in my hand and said, "I hope Mr. Wolfe is as good as they say." "He is," I said. "That's your problem and your luck." Behind me, in the office, I could hear the small sounds Wolfe makes when he is moving nothing but the world. A chair creak, a drawer sigh, the blotter accepting an elbow. Somewhere in the city, a storage locker sat with a steel box in a numbered slot and a paper that thought it could command 4 people to behave. In our kitchen, a tiny knife was absent, and an arso waited to be wrapped and returned. In our front room, 4 suspects and 1 efficient woman regarded my grin like it was an instrument. If the brownstone had been disturbed, it had. Decided to enjoy the intrusion while it lasted. Wolfe would decide what left by the door and what left by the window. Babysitting a roomful of highly motivated adults is like minding a basket of cats. No claws until there's a reason. I parked them in the front room where the chairs make you sit up and think about your posture. Holt tried the window as if there might be a reservation outside. Ames examined his cuffs the way a banker contemplates mercy. Brody read our books, spines out, and approved or disapproved, and Mara folded her folder in halves and quarters without creasing it. Rena sat as if the chair had earned it and watched me with the professional interest of someone who has poured for men who think they're original. Their phones lived in my pocket, humming faintly like captive bees. The house was quiet in the way our house gets when Wolfe is turning the walls into graph paper behind a closed door. I gave them nothing but my grin and the occasional suggestion that the pillows were for decoration, not support. 10 minutes into our hour, the hall phone rang. It's an honest bell. It does not do vibrato. I got it on 2. A voice announced itself as the storage facility in Long Island City, West Annex Compliance Desk. We'd been expecting a call today, the voice said, because counsel for the Vance estate, meaning a cheerful email factory, had placed a courtesy hold on our W-series lockers pending an inventory review. The voice continued like a metronome. 5 minutes ago, an access was attempted at RW18 using a vendor escort badge, then aborted. The assent slip registered abrasion on the 4th line, LB, and the sensor tripped. Video showed a man in a helmet carrying a slim case. "We have logged a failed audit," the voice concluded, very pleased with itself, "and, per instruction, are notifying Mr. Wolfe." "Don't hang up," I told him, which is a suggestion that works better with clerks than with suspects. I cupped the receiver and called "Wolfe" toward the office door. I didn't have to yell. He opened and filled the frame and took the phone like a judge receiving a bailiff's whisper. He listened for 30 seconds, asked for the timestamp and the name attached to the vendor escort badge, R. Alvarez, said "satisfactory," and hung up. Then he turned his head toward me just enough to use my shoulder as a sounding board. "Bring them," he said. The hour had not expired, but Wolfe has never been content with the calendar when he can have the clock. I waved them back into the office and returned their phone, still in my pocket because I have a sense of theater too. Wolfe didn't rise. He didn't have to. He looked at Holt, then at Rena, then at Brody, and let the silence get its coat. "Someone," he said, "has just attempted to remove leverage and replace it with noise. Miss Alvarez's badge was used as escort. A man wearing a helmet carried a case. The assent slip registered. An attempt to erase Dr. Brody. The system did what systems do when men grow impatient. It complained. The locker is now on audit hold." Ames's eyebrows tried to pretend they were new to his face. "This is absurd," he began, and Wolfe pivoted the bulk of his attention an inch to the right. That was enough to subtract him. "Miss Alvarez," Wolfe said, "did you permit your badge to be used by someone other than yourself?" "No," she said. "I was on the floor. If my badge pinged there, it was cloned." She didn't add that this is a trick certain vendors learn because it's a living. "Mr. Holt," Wolfe asked, "did you authorize any man with a helmet to accompany any case to any locker today?" "No," Holt said, and for once didn't varnish it. "And I didn't authorize anyone to scuff a slip." "Doctor." "Brody," Wolfe said, "when a man tries to erase you in absentia, how does it feel?" Brody's mouth played with philosophy and lost. "Consistent," he said, which was as close to a joke as he gets. Then to me, as if he needed to confess to a witness rather than a detective, I warned Howard that unanimity invites sabotage. He said the point of unanimity is to make sabotage visible. "Your friend was right," Wolfe said. "Visible and now ridiculous." He fixed on Ames. Mr. Ames, you were denied entry once. You sought a proxy. You will not be coy. Ames could be graceful under fire. It's one of the reasons men let him run their money. Mr. Wolfe, he said, with the smile you use on a waiter you need. If some overeager person interpreted my past frustration as present instruction, I will correct that. My firm does not sanction criminal improvisation. Pfui, Wolfe said. Your firm sanctions whatever you call settlement outside the ledger. You simply prefer to do it without leaving wax rings on other men's cutting boards. Rena's head turned by a degree. The words had been for Ames, but the wax was hers to know. Whoever practiced in your kitchen, she said, was not my staff. We don't practice on other people's boards. We practice at the bar after close-on pulled corks we would have pulled anyway. If someone brought an asso into your house, it's because they thought they were impressing somebody. They impressed Fritz, I said. It will take a week. Wolfe let it go with a flicker of nostril. Enough. He made it a word that ended more than the sentence. You will all accompany Mr. Goodwin at noon to the West Annex. Miss Kell will authenticate the estate hold. Mr. Ames will sign as witness that he has observed the audit. Mr. Holt will bring Miss Alvarez and any tool she considers necessary. Doctor. Brodie will record, and after recording will write an honest paragraph about what an assent mechanism becomes in the hands of men who prefer influence to law. He settled his hands. You will not, until then, attempt to move any object. Marked Red Willow. You will not communicate with any person who might attempt to move an object marked Red Willow on your behalf. And you will not send any man with a helmet to any locker. If you do, I will call Inspector Kramer and describe to him, in vocabulary he understands, the payments made to a doorman, the presence of shellac on a foreign tool in my kitchen, and the fact that your names appear on papers that do not trouble bookkeepers. You have no right, Ames started. I have appetite, Wolfe said. Rights are an invention for men who share a language. Appetite is older. Sit down. They sat. You don't argue with a mountain when it decides whether to shade you. The phone rang again. I took it. This time it was Saul. He doesn't waste adjectives when verbs will drive. Messenger's name is Diego Lema, he said. Helmet guy, lives in Astoria with a cousin who thinks he's a DJ. He just tried to badge at the annex with a cloned escort. Got spooked by a red light and left. He is now at a diner on Jackson. The grey sedan with the kestrel plate is 2 blocks off, driver reading a paper upside down to keep his face up. You want me to keep Lima in place or let him drift? Keep him on the line, I said. We may want him to do a delivery he didn't plan. Saul grunted. Affirmative, amused, already ahead. I hung up and gave Wolfe the digest for the room because the room was the point. Good, Wolfe said. Mr. Ames, advise your friends at Kestrel that their driver should remain with his paper. I will require him for a legitimate errand later. If he moves, Mr. Panzer will arrange for him to become entangled in a small traffic misunderstanding that will consume his afternoon. Choose. Ames had the look of a man calculating whether to save a pawn or a knight. I will make no calls, he said carefully, which was not what he'd been invited to do. Excellent, Wolfe said. Then events will have their habits. He closed his eyes, opened them, and turned them on Mara. Miss Kell, the lockbox content. I didn't read it, she said, which we'd heard. You didn't, he agreed, but you arranged it. Where would Howard Vance have put a copy of the assent slip that men like Mr. Ames would be too impatient to look for? She frowned at that a fraction, then answered before she decided to be coy. In the catalogue, she said. Not as paper, as notation. He loved code, and he loved it most when it hid in plain sight. The binder, I said. Addendum A had the initials beside Settlements off ledger. The Red Willow page had a wax stain. The numbers on the right margin were in pencil, lighter than the rest. Even and odd. Mara gave me a look that conceded competence. He sometimes used parity to mark consent. Even meant assent. Odd meant pending. If a number was circled, it meant someone had withdrawn. "And on the red willow page?" Wolfe asked. "Number 18, penciled even," she said slowly. "No circle." "So at the time of that notation," Wolfe went on, "assent held." Later, Mr. Vance made the Cork note to remind himself, and to warn, what happens if betrayal occurs. He did not trust Mr. Ames. He adored your competence. He employed Mr. Holt's access. He borrowed Dr. Brodie's language to ennoble his mischief. Then he died and left you all a mechanism you could not operate without exposing yourselves. Brodie let out a breath he might have been keeping since he signed. "You will tell us," he said quietly, "what to do to resolve the matter." "Yes," Wolfe said. "I will remove leverage." He leaned a half-inch forward, which in our office is equivalent to a man leaping on a table. "At noon, at the annex, Mr. Goodwin will supervise the opening of RW 18. He will not remove anything. He will take photographs in the presence of all and will ask the facility to copy and seal the assent slip into a separate audit envelope under the estate hold. The steel box will remain in place. That envelope will come to me. If any person at any time argues that a signature was not freely given, I will supply that argument to the district attorney. If all four of you agree in my presence to dissolve your lattice and to account for all settlements outside the ledger to the proper tax authorities and to Miss Vance as the estate's beneficiary, I will keep the envelope closed. If not, I will open it and invite Mr. Kramer to dinner." "You are blackmailing us with honesty," Ames said. "Yes," Wolfe said. "I am coercing you into integrity. It is a vulgar method. I prefer logic, but you have been in my kitchen." Holt's hands moved on his knees. "If we agree," he said, "what becomes of the wine?" "Wine is a liquid designed for civilized men," Wolfe said. "It will be sold at proper auction and the proceeds distributed as the law demands. Your palates will survive. Your reputations may not. That depends on whether you like my food." Rena shifted just a fraction. "If you keep the envelope closed," she said, "you are trusting us." "No," Wolfe said. "I am trusting appetites. You all like your seats at your tables. You will not trade them for arraignment if you can avoid it. And I am trusting Miss Kell to phone Miss Vance's counsel and to dictate a short document that dissolves any club that uses the word assent to excuse extortion." Mara's chin lifted. "I can do that. And Dr. Brodie will draft a paragraph suitable for the Gazette that explains why unanimity is for marriages and symphonies, not for property." Brodie's eyes flicked with something that might have been shame and might have been relief. "I will," he said. The bell rang again. Fritz, who can sniff weather through a door, went and returned with a small paper parcel tied with string and a card that read, "In the neat, determined hand of men who believe in their own charm, for Miss Vance. With regrets." I didn't touch it. Wolfe didn't let Fritz bring it past the threshold. "From whom?" he asked. "Bernard and Pritchard," Fritz said dryly, and set the parcel on the hall table as if it might extrude ethics. "Archie," Wolfe said, "open it on the stoop, not in my hall." I took it out into the morning where the street could share whatever it contained. The string came easy. Inside was a cork, clean and new, and a coil of red sealing wax. Also a note. "Return the slip. You have no idea what you're touching." The cork was hollowed and lined with shellac as neat as a conscience. I brought the note in with the tip of a pencil. "Pressure," I said, "and stationery from a store with mirrors." "Considerate," Wolfe said. "They will be less considerate after lunch." He turned the big head a quarter and addressed our captured audience as if we had just now begun. "At 11:50, he said, "you will rise and follow Mr. Goodwin. At 2 o'clock, if you have behaved, you will return here, and I will tell you which of you broke into my kitchen and why. If you have not behaved, you will not return at all. The choice, for once, is truly yours." He lifted his eyes to mine. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Call Miss Vance and tell her what we propose. Then call Mr. Panzer and Mr. Durkin. Mr. Panzer will acquire the man with the helmet gently and invite him to describe his employment to me later. Mr. Durkin will make sure the grey sedan does not become interesting. Then prepare to shepherd idiots to Long Island City." I phoned Lenore first. She listened the way a tired woman listens to a lifeguard. When I finished, she said, "Do it," with all the energy she had. I told her to meet us at the annex lobby at 5 of 12 with nothing but her name and a pen. Saul answered and said, "Already watching the catch-up," which meant he had Lima in a booth with a menu and an appetite. Durkin said, "Sedan sneezed and stalled. Tragic," which meant he had put a nail in the right place. When I came back in, Wolfe had his eyes closed, not in fatigue but in disdain for the species. He opened them for me. "One more thing," he said, and it was almost gentle. "After you have secured the envelope, take Miss Vance to a late lunch at a place with no mirrors. Remind her that some men borrow fine words to make ugly bargains. Then bring me the paper, and bring yourself a story." He shut his eyes again. The room held its breath, and the suspects, our circle, did the arithmetic of appetites and consequences. The brownstone had been trespassed. The city had tried its routine. Wolfe had set the table. Now all that remained was whether men who liked power more than truth would prefer both to ruin. When Wolfe tells me to shepherd idiots, I don't pack a crook, I pack patience. At 11:50 I had them lined up in the hall like a school outing. Ames tried to linger last. Holt tried to lead. Mara carried her folder as if it were armor. Brody looked like he wished he'd brought a footnote, and Rena kept her stride neutral. I flagged cabs in order and parceled them out so nobody felt like they had privacy. I rode with Mara and Brody, which meant silence and sighs, while Holt and Rena sat with Ames in the second cab, a cocktail no bartender with sense would pour. The facility sat in Long Island City like a bunker that had sprouted climate control. Inside, a guard in a tie that hadn't been happy in years checked our IDs with the look of a man wondering how his mother had raised him for this. Lenore was waiting in the lobby, small in her coat but steady. She saw Mara first, then Ames, and her chin lifted like she'd decided not to blink. I nodded her reassurance and got her signed in with the estate's courtesy hold. The compliance officer was a fellow named Holcomb, thin, with a voice like a stapler. He led us through to the West Annex, down a hall that smelled of cardboard and chemical cool. Locker RW18 was a row of steel doors that thought highly of themselves. Holcomb produced a key card, tapped, and the door obeyed. Inside was a rack with 24 slots, most filled with wooden cases stamped red willow, but one slot halfway down left a steel box gleaming like it didn't belong. "There," Mara said, before anyone asked. Holcomb lifted it down and set it on the table in the center of the room. He produced another key card and a code, and when the lid popped, you could almost hear everyone lean forward. Inside, on top of a neat envelope sealed in wax, lay the assent slip, 4 lines of signatures with initials. V.A. M.K. S.H. L.B. The paper had a scuff mark along Brody's line, but it held. Under it, Holcomb didn't reveal. Wolfe had instructed not to remove the envelope. I had my camera ready. Click for the slip, click for the wax, click for the box, click for the initials. Holcomb resealed and stamped it into a compliance envelope, signed across the flap, and handed it to me. "Audit copy," he said. "Primary stays in place. You'll need a court order to move it." "Lucky us," I said. "We're just tourists." Ames's smile had no vitamins. "That paper is the only thing preventing chaos. Without it, we cannot move forward." "Without it," I told him, "you cannot move sideways either. Think of it as exercise." Lenore stepped closer to the table. She hadn't said a word since entering. Her eyes were on the envelope in the box, the original. That's what they've been clawing for, she said. That list. As if my uncle's riddles weren't cruel enough in life. Cruel? Brody asked, almost defensive. She looked at him, her voice low but sharp. He built traps. For himself, for partners, for me. He put secrets in corks, for God's sake. Do you call that trust? Brody shut his mouth. Sometimes silence is the right kind of philosophy. Holcomb resealed the box, slotted it back in, locked the rack, and signed the ledger. That's it, he said, pleased to have accomplished bureaucracy. Our W-18 remains under hold. Any removal flags the system. We filed out. At the lobby, I handed Lenore the audit envelope with care. She turned it over in her hands as if it were both burden and shield. This goes to Wolfe, I said. He'll keep it warmer than a safe. She nodded. I want him to burn it, she said, but too softly for Ames to hear. We broke the group there, with Lenore taking my arm for a cab, while the others scattered to their offices and guilt. I made sure Saul's eyes followed Ames's sedan, and that Durkin clocked Holt's next stop. Then I steered Lenore to a corner restaurant with red leather booths and no mirrors, per Wolfe's prescription. Over lunch, she pushed food around and let words fall like crumbs. My uncle thought leverage was cleaner than love. He said people were honest only when they needed each other. This list, it's a leash. If Wolfe keeps it, they're bound. If he burns it, they're free. What will he do? Wolfe doesn't burn paper, I said. He digests it. He'll tell you when the nutrients are ready. Her laugh was short and cracked. And me? Do I inherit my uncle's enemies with the cellar? You inherit the cellar, I said. The enemies come free. Wolfe will handle them long enough to make you safe. By 2 o'clock we were back in the office. Wolfe was in his chair, a book in hand, as if we hadn't just paraded suspects across boroughs. I handed him the envelope. He studied it, the flap, the signature, then set it on the desk as though it were butter waiting to soften. Report, he said. I gave him the tour. Holcomb, the box, the slip, the scuff, the reseal, the faces. He listened without comment, only one small grunt when I said Lenore wanted the thing burned. Then he called for Fritz, who brought coffee and stood with arms folded, still smouldering over his disturbed spices. The suspects arrived back like planets resuming orbit, each trailing unease. Wolfe gestured them into their chairs without words. When the silence was thick enough, he spoke. You have seen your leash, he said. You have seen that it still binds. You have also seen that it is fragile. Mr. Ames attempted to erase Dr. Brody's assent. Had he succeeded, the ledger would have screamed. You are fortunate incompetence protects you. I have the copy. I will not release it unless required. Your next act is simple. You will dissolve Lattice. You will file documents acknowledging all off-ledger settlements as income, and you will distribute wine according to law. If you fail, I will deliver this to Inspector Kramer and invite him to enjoy your company. Ames's lips parted, then closed. Holt stared at his shoes. Mara looked resigned. Brody rubbed the bridge of his nose. Rena watched Wolfe as if to measure his appetite. You are making us confess to fraud? Ames said finally. I am making you confess to idiocy, Wolfe corrected. Fraud is incidental. Mara put her folder down. I'll draft the dissolution. Lenore will sign. Lenore's chin was steady. I'll sign if Wolfe tells me it's the right way. It is, Wolfe said. Your uncle's ghost built this snare. I will not permit it to amuse itself further. Brody exhaled, a scholar's surrender. Then it ends. Ends, Wolfe repeated, but not concluded. Someone entered my kitchen with an arso, practiced on a cork, and left a knife missing. That is not a corporate act. That is an individual stupidity, and I will identify it. His eyes swept them one by one, heavy as anvils. "It was one of you. The cork's hollow was lined with shellac. The ring on the board matched the size of a red willow capsule. Whoever practiced believed they would later need to extract a cork concealing something. That man showed his hand too early. Archie will demonstrate." That was my cue. I fetched the arso, still bagged. On Wolfe's nod, I slid it into a practice cork I'd brought from Fritz's tray. With a twist, it yielded. Inside was nothing, but the ring it left was the twin of the stain on the board. "Mr. Holt," Wolfe said without raising his voice, "your chef hands purchased this at 10:20 last night. Your sommelier denies trespassing. You sent a man. He blundered." Holt's color dropped 2 shades. "Aye. You sought to master the technique before today," Wolfe said, "to remove the assent slip and present a fait accompli. You lacked patience. You will now leave this office and await a summons from the district attorney. Mr. Goodwin will escort you to the door." Holt half rose, then sat again, then finally stood with a stiff spine. Rena looked at him but didn't move. I guided him out, made sure the hall was clear, and shut the door on his protests. When I came back, Wolfe had resumed his seat as if he hadn't moved. The others were statues, waiting for gravity. "One fool identified," Wolfe said. "The rest of you will sign your dissolution. Miss Kell will deliver it tonight. Mr. Brodie will write his paragraph. Mr. Ames will explain to his counsel that restraint is preferable to arraignment. Miss Alvarez may go back to her restaurant and remind herself she is efficient." He let the silence sit a moment longer, then leaned back, his eyelids lowering. "Dinner will be on time. Justice," he added, "is only appetizing when it is punctual." That was the cue for Fritz, and the cue for me to breathe. The case wasn't finished, but Wolfe had already plated the main course. Now came the seasoning, and maybe dessert. If Wolfe had declared the main course served, what came next was the part where he salts the edges of the plate so nobody gets clever with their fingers. Fritz announced lunch as if we'd earned it, and then made sure we didn't. And I had. Just convinced a forkful of potato salad to like me when the bell went. Saul doesn't ring like a guest. He appears the way facts do, without permission. I met him at the door. He had a man beside him who had the posture of a person trying to be 2 inches shorter than fate. "Diego Lima," Saul said by way of inventory. "Helmet specialist, bag man, eats at Jackson Diner and pays cash even when the card would be kinder. Twice this week, cash from a Delaware pocket." Lima glanced at me, then at the stairs, gauging the decline of his options. He had a day's beard and a messenger's tan line and the kind of tired you earn by saying yes to the wrong people. "In," I told him, and waved him toward the office. Wolfe didn't bother to rise. He never does. He had the audit envelope on the blotter where it could breathe and his eyelids at half mask, where they do their best work. Lima didn't sit until I told him which chair was least fatal. Saul posted by the bookshelves, which is his way of letting you know the exits are ornamental. I put my notebook down. Wolfe didn't look at it. "Mr. Lima," he said, soft like rain. "You work for restaurants, for private clients, for whomever hands you an envelope and a frown. This week, you worked for a company called Kestrel Holdings, and a restaurant that cares more for access than law. You have been in my kitchen. You have been at a bonded storage locker. You have attempted to erase a name on a slip of paper that does not belong to you. The question is whether you will now work for your own self-preservation." Lima's hands tightened on his knees. You could see the courier's calluses. "I didn't erase nothing," he said. "I tried. The light went red. I left." "Wise," Wolfe said. "You did not wish to add tampering to trespass and conspiracy. Mr. Panzer will return the small knife you took from my kitchen last night, if it is in your pocket. If it isn't, you will tell us to whom you gave it." Lima's eyes went to Saul's, because some men can tell when a man knows. Saul reached into Lima's jacket and came out with the paring knife folded in a handkerchief. Our initials on the butt glared like a witness. "They said to practice," Lima muttered. Said the guy in the house was fat and slow and wouldn't notice if I used the back way. They gave me the puller and the wax and said if I could take something out without breaking the cork, I'd get another envelope. They, Wolfe repeated, as if tasting a spice he was not fond of. Mr. Holt's man bought the asso. Who told you to put it to my board? Lima swallowed. A man from Kestrel with a square jaw and a suit he didn't own, he said. Name he gave was Geller. He said the chef bought the tool at 10:20. He said they'd bring me a case and a cork when it was time, but I should go make sure I could do it so I wouldn't fumble later. Said it wouldn't take long, and nobody would be in the kitchen because rich people sleep. He gave me the address. From whom did he get the address? Wolfe asked. I didn't ask, Lima said, and he hadn't. He pays, I ride. Then let me ask you a question you can answer, Wolfe said. Who cloned Miss Alvarez's badge? Lima looked at Rena, who was not present but had that quality even in recollection. The same guy, he said. Geller. He had a friend do it on a laptop and a thing that beeps. They handed me the plastic. Said it was legal enough. Mr. Ames, Wolfe said without changing his tone, you pay a Mr. Geller as consultant, do you not? Ames, who had rejoined us when Saul walked in because nobody leaves when Wolfe is working, unfolded one cuff and looked at the seam. We retain many consultants, he said. I do not know all their Christian names. You will know the district attorneys, Wolfe said, and perhaps Mr. Kramer's, if Mr. Geller does not find his conscience before dinner. He flicked a glance at Saul. Invite Geller to join Mr. Lima at the Jackson Diner. If he declines, have him delayed. I don't care by whom. Saul's mouth bent half a degree. Already put a book on the booth, he said. He'll sit. Lima's eyes went to me then, like a child at a spelling bee hoping for a smaller word. Look, he said. I ride where they send me. Guy in the sedan says watch the woman's door. I watch. Restaurant girl hands me a flute case. I hand it. Office man says scratch a line that says ELB, says it's just cleanup. I try and the thing screams, so I go. I don't know these initials. I don't even drink wine. Don't ruin me for men who keep me hungry. Wolfe inspected him the way he inspects a peach, judging what you can't see. No, he said, I will not ruin you. I may improve you. You will wait with Mr. Panzer and answer his questions as if he were my right hand. He is. If you lie, he will know. If you tell the truth, he will pay you for it. Later, you may be paid by the district attorney as well. Or not. I do not run that kitchen. Saul guided Lima out with the knife reseated in dignity and the messenger's shoulders higher by half an inch. When the door closed, Wolfe let the air recalibrate. Ames had arranged his face into blandness. It didn't help him. You hired Geller, Wolfe told him. You put a car outside Miss Vance's building. You set men to borrow a badge and to trespass in my kitchen. You hoped to remove Dr. Brody from the slip because his assent is not for sale. You hoped then to manufacture a new rule, a fresh unanimity that excluded your most inconvenient conscience. Brody let out a sound that was either pain or relief. Ames's lips did an inch of curving. Impossible to prove, he said. On the contrary, Wolfe said. Mr. Lima will say he was paid by a man who works for your company. Mr. Panzer will find 3 payments, made this week to Mr. Geller by a kestrel shell. Mr. Durkin will describe the grey sedan that cannot keep from being grey, and your name is on a piece of paper inside a steel box that you tried and failed to open without leaving fingerprints on our beverages. Proof is not what vexes me. Inelegance is. Holt, who had been expelled earlier like a boy caught with a slingshot, knocked once and sent his apology through Rena. He had gone to make a telephone call and found the line busy. Rena, still in the room because Wolfe had not dismissed her, sat with her hands folded and her jaw set where integrity lives. She said, to no one in particular, he didn't tell me about the badge, and let the admission be its own verdict. Mara had stayed quiet, not out of fear, but because she had learned something better. Timing. Now she opened her folder and slid a single page toward me. Draft, she said. Dissolution of the entity, styling itself lattice. Acknowledgement that any settlements made outside the ledger will be accounted for to the estate and the tax authorities. Lenore signs as beneficiary, the rest sign as scoundrels. Plain language, I told her. Wolfe will like the flavor. Wolfe read it with his eyes only. Add a sentence, he said, that no member of the dissolved entity will attempt to enforce any private assent mechanism against any other, on penalty of my making the audit envelope public. He didn't look up. Then bring it to me and I will read it aloud until you all understand it. Before Mara could mark it, the hall phone rang again. I took it. Durkin. Kestrel sedan got a flat, he said, as if describing an act of God. Driver stayed with the car. The man who fits square jaw found himself offered coffee by a precinct acquaintance who'd like to talk about cloned badges. He will be later to everything than he meant. Good, I said, and told Wolfe. He nodded, and the nod meant two things: that the world had decided to help him, and that he had expected it to. Brodie stood up and then remembered he was in our office and sat down as if adjusting a principle. Mr. Wolfe, he said, if you intend to coerce us into honesty and then feed us, you are a better philosopher than I am. I intend to feed no one who has not signed, Wolfe said. Fritz will not permit me to serve food to men whose appetites insult him. Fritz said from the doorway, because accuracy demands its due. I'm not a footnote. No, Wolfe agreed. You are a tyrant in white. I took Mara's draft down to the kitchen table because that's where decent work is done, and she inked the added line while the room breathed. Lenore signed first with a hand that had learned steadiness in the last 12 hours. Brodie signed with reluctance that tasted like humility. Rena was not a member. She looked at the line where S. Holt would go and made a sound that does not translate into consonants. Ames signed like a man mortgaging a view. I initialed as witness because the law enjoys my pen. When we were done, Wolfe pressed the paper flat with a palm and gave it 2 words, adequate binding, that count as praise. He set it aside and looked at the audit envelope long enough to make even paper sweat. Now, he said, the letter in the cork. Lenore's head lifted. The room did not move. It gathered. Howard Vance, Wolfe went on, enjoyed puzzles that taught him he was clever. The note we found in the cork was not instruction to you, it was instruction to himself. He was warning himself as he grew more frightened of his own rituals. Betrayal voids the bargain. That is not poetry, it is policy. He meant that if one of you, Mr. Ames, behaved as you were born to, the whole contraption he had built could be declared null. The assent slip was never law, it was theatre. It worked only because you consented to be seen consenting. He hid a copy in a cork because he had begun to think you might not show up to be seen. That letter is the only honest thing he wrote. Mara looked at him then, something like pity flickering. He thought I'd find it and make it stop, she said. He thought you were his better self, Wolfe said. You are not, but you will do. You have just done. Now we will conclude. He turned his head, the same quarter turn that has unnerved murderers and older men, and set the angle on Rena. Miss Alvarez, he said, you will return to your restaurant and continue to earn your reputation. You will inform Mr. Holt that he will be contacted by a man with a badge and an appetite. You will also tell him that if he attempts to hire another messenger near my kitchen, I will teach him how appetites end. I'll tell him, she said, and stood, and I'll sleep. Do, Wolfe said. You have been efficient. She left with the stride of a woman who has stopped making excuses for other people's schemes. Brodie followed her to the door and went the other way. He had a paragraph to compose that would displease donors at gala dinners, and he looked almost glad. Mara gathered her folder, lighter than when she had carried it in, and paused by Lenore. He used you like a compass, she said quietly. I'm sorry. I know, Lenore said, and meant it, and then turned to Wolfe. You still haven't told me what's under the envelope in the box. I have not, he said, because I do not yet need to. Ames had remained. He had that look men get when they finally see the bill. Will you keep that envelope forever? He asked, almost polite, like a priest with a confession. No, Wolfe said. I have no sacraments. I have a kitchen and an office and an aversion to stupidity. When you have filed your declarations and paid your arrears and refrained from hiring men with helmets for a season and a day, I will burn it and drink something fit to mark the occasion. You said you don't burn paper, Lenore reminded him. I said I don't burn paper before I have extracted its use, Wolfe said. After it may cook. Ames stood. He did not offer his hand. Wolfe would not have taken it. He adjusted his cuff again and found it exactly where it had been all along. You've made your point, he said. No, Wolfe said. I've made your options. He turned away, which for him is as final as a door. After they had gone, after the house remembered what it likes to be, Wolfe let the big frame settle. The audit envelope sat on the blotter like a quiet promise. Fritz came to the door and asked whether the mustard would accompany the veal or the veal the mustard. Wolfe pronounced sentence in favor of the mustard and then said to me, eyes closed, You will go to Jackson Diner. You will take Mr. Geller's temperature. If he runs hot, you will invite him to cool off here. If he runs cold, you will let Mr. Panzer enjoy his afternoon. Bring me only what I can eat. Confessions or pies, I said. Either, he said. Preferably both. I got my hat. On the way out, I glanced at the kitchen drawer. The paring knife was back, and the jars of paprika and cinnamon had found their way home. Fritz, humming, put the arso on a towel like a specimen bound for a museum and said he would steam away the varnish because the world must be corrected when it can be. In the hall, the door looked like an ordinary door and the garden gate like a gate. The brownstone had exhaled. It still had one more appetite to satisfy before it forgave the day. Jackson Diner has chrome that remembers presidents and pie that forgives you. Saul had staked out a corner booth under a photograph of a Mets shortstop who deserved better years. Lima sat opposite, turning a spoon as if it might ask him questions he could answer. The square jaw I'd been promised walked in on schedule, scanning the room like a thermostat. He saw Saul, saw me, measured exits, and decided none of us were the type to run. Mr. Geller, I said, offering him the seat that had no view of the door. He sat and pretended the seat was his idea. Up close, you could see the gym had been doing its part while the conscience called in sick. He put both hands on the formica and showed me a wedding band that wanted a better hand. This is a sandwich place, he said, which was almost a line. Good, I told him. Then you know what a pickle is. Saul flicked 2 fingers at the waitress and got coffee like a magic trick. He doesn't say much when there's a man in a slope between honesty and paperwork. We let the coffee steam up until Geller stopped noticing it. You hired Lima, I said. You cloned a vendor's badge. You sent a grey sedan to learn Miss Vance's habits. You paid a doorman's relative to text you if she carried anything that looked like leverage. And you gave a working stiff an arso and told him to practice in my kitchen because rich people sleep. They don't. They digest. He did the thing men do when they are told their resume. Deny only the verbs they can't spell. Nobody broke into your kitchen, he said. You sent a man who stole a knife and left wax, I said. The knife is back. The wax is cleaned. The charge sheet is warming. Speak before it burns. Lima swallowed loudly enough to be useful. Geller watched the ceiling fan make unambitious laps. When he brought his eyes down, they were calibrated differently. You boys don't call cops, he said. We call men who arrive before cops to make sure the cop's first question isn't, where's the mustard? I said. "You're not in a murder story. You're in a story about idiots who confuse access with right. That means you get a chance to change genres. Here's the trade. You place the money and the orders. We place you at the table with a district attorney who likes confessions that salvage calendars. In return, you hand me what you have on your phone that proves who told you to erase LB, and who gave you a name that rhymes with Bernard and Pritchard." He gave me a look that had grown men afraid of audits. I gave him a smile that had made men return watches. He reached into his jacket like a movie extra and produced a phone with a case that had lost fights with keys. He tapped, scrolled, and turned the screen. Saul's shoulder had already decided to see it. A string of messages from a contact saved as V with a number that had warmed Ames's pockets. The language had the polish of a man who pays people to write emails and then rewrites them to sound ruthless. "Reset lattice," one read. "LB will not sign. Remove his line. Present me photo." Another. "Escort badge can be cloned. Use Alvarez. She's efficient and credulous." And, "If WV-". He corrected himself 2 texts later with HV-. "Without it, we vote our future." An attachment, a glossy business card for Bernard and Pritchard Wines, with a logo pilfered from a stock site and an address that resolved to a mailbox and a printer. Another attachment, a photo of a page from a binder, our binder, with the red willow section open and a neat pencil in the margin underlining "No, 18 inches, and hold for lattice." "Send them," I said. He did. "Forward them to that number," I added, and read him one of the few combinations of digits I didn't keep in my pocket. "Wolfe's line is not for sharing, but mine knows how to carry weight." He hesitated. Saul cleared his throat, which in his country means finish the necessary step before your luck changes. Geller pressed and the little paper plane flew. I watched it land on my phone with a humble ping. "And the brownstone address?" I asked. "I followed her from a cab," he said, not proud. "A man on the desk texted me. I texted the car. The car watched a door. We threw the B&P thing at you to see if you'd let us fish. You didn't bite. Rich people don't sleep," I said. "They hire cooks." He tried on a grin, found the seam rough, and let it go. "Am I going to be arrested here?" he asked Saul, finally directing the question where it belongs. "Not today," Saul said. "You're going to finish your coffee, go back to Kestrel, and tell your boss a man named Nero Wolfe is going to call him during his lunch and teach him a new definition of settlement. If he runs, you'll be arrested tomorrow instead of today. If he sits, you may see your kid's soccer game." Geller blinked, which isn't always contrition, but will do. He drank the coffee like it had rules and left without trying to shake hands. Saul looked at me over the rim of his cup. "He's a clerk with muscles," he said. "He'll tell the truth if it makes him look like a man who can still negotiate. Then we'll ask him questions that let him." I got back to the brownstone with pie and proof. Fritz took the pie because it was in the public interest, and I took the phone to Wolfe. He didn't need to see the messages to know they existed. He read them anyway, the lids lowering a fraction with each idiot phrase. When he looked up, it wasn't for applause. "Good," he said. "You will phone Mr. Ames and tell him Mr. Wolfe wishes to speak to him at 6:10. He will be in his office and alone. If he is not, I will skip to dessert with Mr. Kramer." I made the call. Ames's assistant had gone home to a life with fewer mirrors, and Ames took his own phone. His voice wore courtesy like a starched collar. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, as if we were strangers he'd liked once. "Be at your desk at 6:10, I said. "Wolfe will call. Make sure your dictionary's handy. He's going to look up void." "Threats," he murmured. "Vocabulary," I said, and hung up. The afternoon took on the shape it likes. Flat, quiet, polite. Mara sent over a clean draft with Wolfe's sentence added, and a cover letter that made a notary unnecessary by working too hard. Brody faxed, or Whatever men with faculty accounts do now. A paragraph that would read nicely in a Sunday supplement and annoy donors who prefer their ethics without footnotes. Rena sent a single line through the maitre d'. He knows. Saul kept Lema under a cloud that was not rain and let him eat. Durkin parked old Misery across from Kestrel and made eye contact with every bored man who thought he enjoyed anonymity. At 5:30, Lenore called. She sounded like she had found the right plain sweater and the wrong end of a nap. "Do we end this tonight?" she asked. "Wolfe will decide when to end it," I said. "You will decide whether to enjoy the quiet after." "I don't know what quiet is anymore," she said, and then, because life isn't all noir, "Thank Fritz for the roles I didn't know I needed." "I will," I said. "They forgive many sins." At 6:10 I was in place, Wolfe in his chair, the envelope on the blotter like a paperweight with a pulse. He dialed with 2 fingers, as if the phone might otherwise misunderstand. He did not use the speaker. Wolfe is old-fashioned about public address. "Ames," he said when the line opened. "Mr. Wolfe," Ames said. His consonants were crisp enough to slice a cheap tie. "Your clerk has shared your messages," Wolfe said. "They are tedious. You will dissolve your little pageant, account for your settlements, and refrain from attempting to edit reality with tools you purchase after 10 at night. If you do not, I will deliver a sealed envelope to Inspector Kramer containing enough to make you late to everything for a very long time." "You don't open envelopes," Ames said. "You told the girl." "I eat," Wolfe said. "I have made an exception for dessert." Ames let breath roll over his teeth. "You cannot forever use coercion to enforce virtue," he said. "No," Wolfe said. "I can only do it today. Tomorrow your life will proceed without me. That is your misfortune." "Suppose," Ames said. "I agree. Suppose I sign. You still have that envelope. You become the arbiter of a private mistake. Who elected you?" Wolfe's eyelids came down, not in tiredness, but to enjoy a texture of silence. When he spoke, he had lemon in his voice. "Your friend, Howard Vance, elected me when he let a Cork teach him morality and failed. Your sommelier nominated me when she proved efficient. Your assistant nominated me when she remembered where parity lives. Mr. Lema nominated me when he returned my knife. I am a coalition of appetites, Mr. Ames. Do not try to vote me out." Ames said nothing, which I liked. When he finally remembered how the game ends, he said, "You will have the signatures by morning." "No," Wolfe said, "by 9 tonight. If they are not here at 9, you will be across from Mr. Kramer at 9:15. Good evening." He hung up with a tender little motion that would have been affectionate if the phone had been human. Then he closed his eyes and breathed. It wasn't fatigue. It was the man enjoying gravity. The bell rang at 8:57, which is punctuality with a flourish. Mara came with papers, Doctor. Brodie with a face that had been told the truth and had decided not to lie to itself. Rena didn't come. She had service to run. Holt did come, with the district attorney's courtesy card in his pocket and color that had learned paleness. Ames came last, alone, and set his pen to the dissolving with the briskness of a man who knows how ink works. Lenore signed again, smaller than before, which is how burdens get lighter. Wolfe read the document aloud. He does that to make language behave. He added a full stop with his voice that nailed the last line to the desk, and then looked at me. I took the audit envelope, laid it on the blotter, and watched, because Wolfe performed for none of us and all of us, while he turned it over and balanced its weight in his palm. Then he put it back in the safe without a flourish and spun the dial. "Now," he said, and the room tightened its shoes. "The kitchen." Ames's head tilted, small. Holt looked at the floor. Brodie watched his hands. Mara didn't move. Lenore watched Wolfe. He turned his big head a quarter toward the garden, as if he could still smell wax. "Mr. Holt sent a messenger," he said. "Mr. Ames supplied his purpose. That is simple. The impertinence, however, was the address. You would not take such a risk unless you believed you could enter and leave without fuss. That belief did not come from a clerk's mouth. It came from familiarity. Someone who knew our habits, who knew Fritz's cues, the back latch, the afternoon quiet, told you that someone is not a doorman or a driver. It is a woman who has been in my kitchen. He looked at Mara. Not like a shot, like weather. Her face didn't change. That takes practice you don't get in a day. I haven't been in your kitchen, she said, and it wasn't even a good lie. I met Archie in the front room. I handed Wolfe a calendar. I've not seen the back door. You haven't, Wolfe agreed. But you have been in my house. Once, last winter, when you brought Mr. Vance here to ask a question he decided not to ask. You stood at my kitchen threshold while Fritz shooed you because Mr. Vance wanted to compliment him on something he ate. Yesterday, when you wrote the addresses for Archie, you mentioned the alley door at Lenore's building without being told it existed. You don't make a habit of noticing kitchens, Miss Kell. But you noticed mine once, and you told Mr. Ames you believed a back door could be found. That was enough for a man like Mr. Geller to send a boy with a tool to test his luck. Mara didn't blink. Then she did. Once. I told Victor, she said, turning not to Ames but to the floor, which is where honesty sometimes lives, that if he tried something stupid in that house, he would regret it. I warned him. He did not listen. Ames opened his hands to show the air what they could hold. And you now ask us to believe you warned us while describing the target. I ask nothing, she said evenly. I'm done asking anything. Wolfe made a small noise. Not approval and not reproach. You have now all behaved at the level I expected, he said. Which is middling. There are 2 items remaining. One is Mr. Holt's appointment with a man who enjoys subpoenas. The other belongs to me. He reached for the envelope again, not to open it, but to touch it with a finger as if confirming that facts still exist. What is under that slip, he said, is not a hoard of cash nor a confession. It is the instrument by which your assent mechanism destroys itself without my help. A letter of instruction signed by Mr. Vance, declaring that upon his death any single instance of coercion, bribery, tampering, or trespass undertaken by any signatory or their agent voids the compact and vests control of the Red Willow lots solely in Miss Lenore Vance for disposition by sale at public auction and distribution by law. It may have a notarization, it may have a silly Latin word. It is what he meant by betrayal voids the bargain. He liked riddles, but he was not obscure when frightened. Is that guess or knowledge? Brodie asked, genuinely curious. It is deduction, Wolfe said, and appetite. He did not want perpetual dinners with men he disliked. He wanted a mechanism that let him feel clever and safe. He built one, and then, at the end, he hid a lever that would topple it. I do not need to read it to know its flavor. If I am wrong, Miss Vance will laugh at me later while she enjoys a properly catalogued sale. Lenore put a hand on the desk, not to steady the paper, but to steady herself. Then it ends, she said. It ends, Wolfe said. Go home, all of you. Do not come back unless summoned. If any of you touches a cork in the next month, I will hear of it and I will chew. He flicked a glance at Fritz, who had been standing in the doorway with the proprietary interest of an emperor. Fritz, the veal. Punctual, Fritz said, as justice should be. They left in 1s and 2s. The brownstone exhaled the way a body does after a sneeze. Wolfe leaned back, shut his eyes, and let the chair remember his shape. That was the reveal, I said, because sometimes you narrate history for the record. No, he murmured. That was schooling. The reveal is dessert, after dinner. Dinner did what it always does at the brownstone, made the world a little smaller and more manageable. Fritz's veal had a mustard that came on like a kindly sermon, and the asparagus didn't apologize for being green. Wolfe ate with that implacable patience that makes time mind itself. When he set knife and fork parallel, the chair took him back a fractional inch, and the room understood the mains were over. He waited through coffee like a judge tolerating a closing argument he'd already decided. Then he turned his head a quarter toward me and said, "Bring Miss Vance in." Lenore had been in the front room with the dignity of a woman who has had to learn it fast. She came, took the visitor's chair, and put both hands on the arms as if making peace with furniture. She looked at the safe, then at the audit envelope on the blotter, and then at Wolfe. He gave her nothing but the weight of his attention. "You will sleep tonight," he told her. "Before you do, you will be instructed." She nodded once. That was her only waste of motion. "You have asked the same question 3 ways, Wolfe went on. "What's under the assent slip? Why your uncle hid a letter in a cork? Why men who can afford waiters tried to teach a courier to meddle with wax on my cutting board? The answers are the same. Mr. Vance built an apparatus for control and discovered too late that control is a poor surrogate for trust. He did not stop himself. Men rarely do. He made a contingency instead. The cork note, its language." He tapped the paper in the safe with a finger big as a hinge. "Is the key to reading the rest. Betrayal voids the bargain." That is not metaphor, it is instruction. He stored the instruction where his scavengers would not think intelligence could hide, in sentiment. If that letter is not precisely the formula for nullifying lattice, I will eat a cork. Lenore's mouth kicked a little, then found its composure. "You won't have to," she said. "No," he agreed. "I will not. Men who grade their own cleverness pick predictable flavors." He used doctor. Brody's dignity to erect a ritual. He used Mr. Holt's access to nourish it. He used Miss Kell's competence to maintain his books and your future inconvenience. He used Mr. Ames's appetite to keep it funded and dangerous. He flicked a glance at me so light I could pretend it wasn't there. Mr. Goodwin's patience to end it. I don't blush on command. I took coffee. "You noticed it all," Lenore said. It wasn't flattery. She was taking inventory. I noticed enough. He settled heavier and let the logic unroll as if it had been waiting all afternoon for its shoes. The kitchen trespass told me more than the annex did. An arso for clean extractions, sealing wax not ours, a ring the size of a red willow capsule. Those are not accidents. You do not bring a practice cork to a man's kitchen unless you intend to pull a real one soon, and you do not practice where you intend to perform if you are competent. Therefore, it was incompetence or arrogance. Mr. Holt supplied both. He bought the tool at 10:20. He offended Fritz by moving paprika into Cinnamon's bed. That suggested haste too clean for panic and too stupid for subtlety. A messenger, not a chef, did the touching. A chef would have respected another man's kitchen. A messenger would believe houses exist to be transited. Mr. Lima obliged us with his knife and his candle. The badge at the annex was Miss Alvarez's because she is efficient. Cloning it was a consultant's trick, cheap and vain. The grey sedan belonged to Mr. Ames's money the way ivy belongs to a wall. It climbs and conceals. The phone messages Mr. Geller carried had the vocabulary of a man who has read the word assent and prefers its sound to its meaning. Reset lattice, remove LB-, you saw them. Vulgar, shop-worn, useful. He let the contempt do its work and then folded it away. The binder told me the rest. Mr. Vance used parity, penciled even numbers, to mark assent in a place no one would read them as law. That was his sense of humor. When he wrote number, 18 preserves leverage, he meant the same joke, that a numbered slot held not wine but paper that could end the charade he had built if someone did exactly what Mr. Ames could not resist doing. It was his last exertion of control over men he knew too well. Lenore looked at the safe again. "And you won't open it?" "I will not need to," Wolfe said. "The signatures have been delivered. The dissolution is executed. Mr. Holt is ticketed for a conversation. Mr. Ames will instruct counsel to discover tax morality in the next 24 hours and to feign affection for it. Dr. Brodie will write himself out of illusion. Miss Kell will stop being a compass for a dead man. It is enough. The bell rang with an air of knowing its lines. I went. Kramer doesn't do foyer charm, he does hallway thunder. He came in with his hat tilted like trouble and a cigar that had been denied a light for moral reasons. I gave him the short tour: trespass, wax, cloned badge, messages, the man called Geller waiting at home under a cloud, Lima's knife, Holt's arceau. He looked at the envelope on Wolfe's desk and then at Wolfe with the expression of a man who has caught us with our hands in a cookie jar that belongs to the law. "I've got boys who can pull corks," he said. "Not in my kitchen," Wolfe told him, and gazed at the cigar until it confessed and wilted. "You will please confine your inquiries to Mr. Holt's practice, Mr. Geller's devices, Mr. Ames's car, and the gentleman at the lobby desk who accepted small currency for his discretion. The rest is civil and already resolved. If you develop a thirst for knowledge about the Red Willow slots, you may apply to the estate's attorneys for admission and spend the rest of the month in litigation." Kramer grunted like a barge. "You've made a hobby out of telling me where my jurisdiction ends," he said. He took the knife in the handkerchief and the printouts I had waiting, the photos from the annex, the wax ring, the arceau receipt with time and clerk, Geller's texts I had persuaded him to forward to my number, and which Saul had preserved properly with a neat chain of custody. "He didn't say thank you because he isn't paid to," he allowed, grudgingly. "You buy decent cameras. I'll talk to your cook about the trespass." "You'll do it by telephone," Wolfe said. "Fritz is occupied." "Occupied," Fritz called from the doorway. "With a tart tatin you will not be invited to." Kramer's mouth did what it does when faced with a tart he won't meet. "One of these days," he said. "Yes," Wolfe agreed placidly. "Probably to testify. Good evening." Kramer went, heavier than he had entered, but resigned to carrying useful things. I closed the door on his cigar's sigh and came back to find Wolfe with his eyes half closed and his hand resting on the blotter near the envelope as if appetite and paper recognized each other's limits. "So that's that," Lenore said softly. You could hear something uncoil in her, not relief and not victory, something safer than both. "You didn't make me into my uncle." "I would have refused," Wolfe said. He made a habit of substituting consent rituals for decency. "You're not obliged to continue any man's habits." She stood. You could see her decide whether to offer her hand and decide not to because Wolfe does not collect handshakes. "I'll sell the cellar," she said, "with a real catalogue. No riddles." "Do," he said. "Wine deserves drinkers, not litigants." After she left, the house remembered its shape. The air felt like it had had a bath. Fritz brought the tart and did us the favor of pretending it needed our judgment. Wolfe took a forkful with the gravitas of a verdict and closed his eyes to let the caramel set its terms. "Archie," he said without opening them, "we will burn the envelope in a month." "You told Ames you would burn it when he learned to like taxes," I reminded him. "A month is my forecast for his moral education," he said. "If he fails his lessons, we will alter the calendar." "You don't burn paper," I said, because he had told Lenore exactly that. "I don't burn paper that might amuse me later," he said. "This one will not. It will only tempt stupid men to be theatrical. I tire of those." I took my share of tart and let his logic cool beside the plate. "You never told them how you knew Mara had fed the back door into the rumour mill." "I did," he said, "in outline. She is competent. Competent people notice handles. She told Mr. Ames that my house, like all houses, has one. She also wrote the dissolution," I said. "She did what she is for," he said. "Human beings are tolerable when they work." We ate. At 9:30, Saul called to say Geller had confessed to the badge trick and had named the man at the desk and the account that paid him. At 10, Durkin advised that the grey sedan had acquired a spare and a parking ticket, and that the driver's day had been more educational than planned. At 10:30, Mara's document arrived by email with everyone's signatures, including Holt's, which sported an uneven line as if signed between apologies. By 11, the house had the sound it likes. Pipes at peace, books breathing, orchids thinking their plant thoughts upstairs. I checked the garden latch, oiled, yes, but by Fritz's hand now, and made the round that means you can trust locks because you've taught them the right names. When I came back to the office, Wolfe had settled into the chair the way a stone decides, and the envelope was gone from the blotter into the Globe's modest belly. He opened one eye at me. "You will file our copies," he said. "The photographs, the receipts, Mr. Panzer's report and Mr. Durkin's, the letter from that ridiculous Bernard and Pritchard, and a note of your own." "What note?" I asked. He let the eye close and opened the other one out of fairness. "That consent cannot be rented," he said. "When men attempt to lease it, it rots, like wine stored upright. You may phrase it to suit your vocabulary." "I'll put it where it won't offend the dust," I said, "and I'll add that corks are for keeping, not hiding." He snorted, which is praise in our house, and let sleep collect him by the edges. I turned out the lamps and left him with his chair, his full stomach, and the Globe that wasn't a confessional but would do. In the kitchen, Fritz had set the arceau on a high shelf, polished and reformed. The paring knife sat in its gap as if it had never dreamed of a field trip. The jars were alphabetized to satisfaction. I told the drawer to behave, and it agreed. On my way up, I thought about Lenore and her audit envelope, about Brodie and his paragraph that would annoy men who liked unanimity because it excused them from honesty, about Holt and the DA's appointment card, about Ames and his new romance with filing. I thought about a dead man who trusted a cork more than his friends, and a living man who trusted dinner more than theatre. Outside, the city tried hard to be complicated. Inside, for the night at least, we had decided simplicity would do. At the top of the stairs, I looked back down into the dark mouth of the office. Wolfe's voice came out of it, not loud, not sleepy, just there. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Betrayal always voids the bargain," he said. "The only question is when men admit it." "Tonight," I said. "Tonight," he agreed, and the brownstone shut its eyes. I had barely finished setting the chairs when Wolfe emerged from the elevator with the slow dignity of a man entering a courtroom where the verdict was already written. He crossed the room, lowered himself into the throne behind his desk, and arranged his bulk so that the yellow silk of his vest showed no crease. By then, the suspects were in their places, like school children lined up for inspection. Inspector Kramer had installed himself near the Globe with the stubborn glare of a man ready to interrupt, though we both knew he wouldn't until Wolfe allowed it. Wolfe's eyes drifted across the room, pausing on each of them, Miss Dunning with her jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts. Raymond Hale looking as though his tailor had stitched him into his suit, and Mrs. Ashcroft clutching her handbag as if it held her last breath. "You are all here," Wolfe said, "because a man was murdered, and each of you is linked by opportunity and, more significantly, by motive. Yet, as in all such matters, only one of you killed him. The rest are merely guilty of lesser human failings." Miss Dunning gave a quick gasp. Hale shifted, tugging at his collar. Wolfe ignored them both. "I will be brief. The key lies in two details that might have seemed trivial. The cinnamon on the saucer and the page torn from the ledger. The cinnamon, Mr. Hale, was not a garnish, but a signal. An old habit of yours when sending notes to your accomplices in the gambling scheme. Unfortunately for you, Mr. Goodwin noticed it." Hale opened his mouth, but Wolfe's palm rose like a heavy stop sign. "Second, the missing page. It recorded an inconvenient loan, one that bound you, Mrs. Ashcroft, to the deceased in ways you would rather not discuss. But you did not kill him. You lacked both the daring and the method." Kramer muttered. Get to it, Wolfe." "I am, Inspector." Wolfe's voice swelled like an organ chord. The murderer was Miss Dunning. She alone had the proximity, the access, and, most telling, the knowledge of Mr. Hale's little cinnamon signals. She poisoned the drink, intending suspicion to fall on him. The torn ledger page was her attempt at camouflage, a false trail to Mrs. Ashcroft. It was clever, but too clever. "Miss Dunning, you overlooked that the saucer was served by Archie, not by Hale. You placed the signal yourself. That was your undoing." The silence that followed was tight enough to snap. Miss Dunning's lips quivered, then parted, and what came out was not denial, but a small, broken sob. Her eyes darted to Hale, then back to Wolfe. He ruined me. He promised—" She stopped, covering her face. Kramer was already moving, handcuffs flashing in the light. "That'll do," he growled. As the inspector led her out, Wolfe shut his eyes, leaned back, and spread his fingers over the arms of his chair. "Pfui, I despise melodrama." I stood, stretched, and said, "You know, you could at least thank me for catching the cinnamon." One eye opened. "Archie, you catch nothing. You notice, I deduce. A most efficient arrangement." "Efficient," I agreed, grinning as I reached for my hat. "And profitable. Don't forget that part." The door closed on the voices in the hall, and the brownstone settled back into the kind of silence Wolfe considered civilization. Another case closed, another killer unveiled, and for me, another evening explaining to the press how Nero Wolfe had done it again. 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 Wolfe had done it again.